Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was a human sage who mastered the true nature of mana. Naruto x Charmcaster, Ben 10. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Echo of a Forgotten Power. The air in the valley of the silent flow tasted of petrichor and the sweet, cloying scent of moon blossoms, a species of flora that only unfurled its petals under the silver gaze of a full moon. It was a place untouched by the clang of steel and the roar of shinobi warfare, a sanctuary carved from the very heart of the elemental nations, yet known to none but its sole inhabitant. Naruto Uzumaki, if he still used that name, sat cross-legged upon a moss-covered precipice, his eyes closed, yet seeing everything. He was not merely observing his surroundings, he was a part of them. The gentle caress of the wind against his skin was a conversation, the rhythmic pulse of the earth beneath him, a familiar heartbeat. This was the essence of being a human sage, to not just wield the power of nature, but to be one with it, to understand its language, to feel its every joy and sorrow. He had been born with this connection, a birthright of a clan long since faded into the mists of history. They were not warriors in the traditional sense, but guardians, tenders of the world's lifeblood, what they called mana. It was the energy that flowed through all things, the invisible river that connected the mightiest tree to the most insignificant pebble. While others learned to mold chakra, a pale imitation, a mere tributary of the great river, Naruto had learned to command the river itself. His childhood had been one of solitude and discovery, a near-death experience in his youth. A fall from a cliff that should have ended him, had instead shattered the dam within his soul, unleashing the torrent of his innate abilities. He had awakened to a world vibrant with color and energy he had never perceived before, a world where he was not an outcast, but a king in his own right. Tonight, however, a discordant note had been struck in the symphony of his valley. A tremor, not of the earth, but of the very fabric of reality. It was a grating, unnatural hum, a wound in the world that bled a sickly purple energy. Naruto's eyes, the color of the sky at dusk, snapped open. He rose to his feet in a single, fluid motion, his simple, homespun robes rustling softly in the breeze. He wore no armor, carried no weapons, for the valley itself was his arsenal. With a thought, the very air around him shimmered and solidified into a dozen kunai of pure, crystalline mana, ACH1 humming with a contained power that would make the most seasoned shinobi tremble. He moved not with the explosive bursts of a ninja, but with the inexorable grace of a falling leaf. He flowed through the dense forest, the trees bending to his will, their branches parting to create a path for him. He reached the source of the disturbance in a matter of moments, a clearing where the air was thick with the stench of ozone and something else, something foul and ancient. In the center of the clearing, a gash in reality pulsed with a malevolent light, a swirling vortex of purple and black. From its depths, a figure stumbled out, a young woman with hair the color of spun moonlight and eyes that burned with a defiant fire. She was clad in a strange, dark attire, her body riddled with cuts and bruises. Yet she carried herself with an air of unyielding pride. Close behind her, a creature of nightmare clawed its way out of the portal. It was a being of shadow and malice, its form constantly shifting, a maelstrom of claws, teeth, and glowing red eyes. It was a demon, not of this world, a creature born of a dimension where magic was a twisted, corrupting force. It let out a guttural roar, a sound that seemed to curdle the very air, and lunged at the young woman. She was not defenseless. With a flick of her wrist, a glowing pink disk of energy materialized in her hand, which she hurled at the creature. It struck the demon with a concussive force, staggering it, but doing little to halt its advance. She was a sorceress, Naruto realized, a wielder of a different kind of power, but one that was still, at its core, a manipulation of mana, a crude and inefficient one, but a manipulation nonetheless. The sorceress, whose name was Charmcaster, was at the end of her rope. She had been fleeing this creature for what felt like an eternity, her every spell, her every incantation, proving insufficient. She had gambled everything on a desperate, last-ditch teleportation spell, a blind leap into the unknown. And it had led her here, to this strange, tranquil forest, and to her impending doom. The demon was upon her now, its claws extended, its hot, fetid breath washing over her. She closed her eyes, a curse on her lips. A final act of defiance. But the killing blow never came. She opened her eyes to see a man standing between her and the demon. He had appeared from nowhere, a silent, sudden presence. He was young, no older than her, with sun-kissed blonde hair and an aura of such profound serenity that it seemed to push back the oppressive malice of the demon. He hadn't drawn a weapon. He hadn't made a single gesture, yet the demon, a being of pure, unadulterated rage, had frozen in its tracks, its glowing red eyes wide with something that looked remarkably like fear. "You are not welcome here," Naruto said, his voice calm, yet resonating with an authority that seemed to shake the very foundations of the clearing. It was not a request, nor was it a command. It was a statement of fact, as immutable as the rising of the sun. The demon, for a moment, seemed to hesitate, its primal instincts warring with its insatiable bloodlust. Then, with a roar of defiance, it lunged, not at Charmcaster, but at the man who dared to stand in its way. Naruto sighed, a soft, almost disappointed sound. So be it. He raised a single hand, his palm open. The air in front of him shimmered, and then, with a sound like the shattering of 1,000 crystals, a wall of pure, solidified mana erupted from the ground. It was not a simple barrier of earth or stone, it was a translucent, crystalline structure. Intricate and beautiful, yet radiating a power that made the very air hum. The demon slammed into it with the force of a battering ram, and for a moment, the wall held, the imp act sending spiderweb cracks across its surface. But it was only a momentary distraction. Naruto's other hand swept through the air in a graceful arc, and from the trees around them, a dozen vines, Ika's a man's arm and glowing with a soft, green light, shot out. They were not ordinary vines. They were infused with Naruto's mana, their strength and speed enhanced 100-fold. They wrapped themselves around the demon's limbs. Its torso, its neck, constricting with an unbreakable grip. The demon thrashed and roared, its shadowy form lashing out, but the vines held firm. Then, Naruto made a fist, and the vines began to glow with a blinding intensity. The demon let out a final, ear-splitting shriek as the pure, natural energy coursed through its corrupted form, a holy fire that purged the unholy. The creature of shadow dissolved into a cloud of black dust, which was then carried away by a gentle breeze, leaving no trace of its malevolent existence. The clearing was silent once more, avenue for the gentle rustling of the leaves and the soft chirping of the night insects. The portal, its anchor in this reality now gone, wavered and then collapsed in on itself, leaving behind nothing but the scent of ozone and the memory of a nightmare. Charmcaster stared, her mouth agape, her mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. The demon that had hounded her across dimensions. The creature that had shrugged off her most powerful spells as if they were mere annoyances, had been dispatched with such effortless grace, such overwhelming power, that it was almost contemptuous. The man, this stranger, had not even broken a sweat. She looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time. He was handsome, in a rugged, natural way, his features sharp and defined, his eyes holding a wisdom that belied his years. But it was his power, his presence, that captivated her. It was a power unlike any she had ever encountered, not the chaotic, untamed energy of magic, but something purer, more fundamental. It was the power of the world itself, and he commanded it as if it were an extension of his own body. Naruto turned to her, his expression one of mild curiosity. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice still calm, still serene. Charmcaster, for the first time in a long time, found herself at a loss for words. She, the proud and powerful sorceress of legerdemain, was rendered speechless by the sheer, unadulterated power of this man. What are you?" She finally managed to stammer out, her voice a hoarse whisper. Naruto smiled, a small, gentle smile that seemed to light up the clearing. "I am Naruto," he said simply. "And you are a long way from home." His words, simple as they were, held a profound truth that resonated deep within her. She was a long way from home, in more ways than one. She had been running for so long, chasing power, chasing revenge, that she had forgotten what it was like to feel safe, to feel protected. And in the presence of this strange, powerful man, in this tranquil, magical valley, for the first time in a very long time, she did. The adrenaline that had been coursing through her veins for days finally receded, replaced by a wave of exhaustion so profound that her knees buckled. She would have collapsed to the ground had it not been for a pair of strong arms that caught her, supporting her with a surprising gentleness. She looked up into Naruto's sky-blue eyes and felt a strange, unfamiliar warmth spread through her chest. It was a warmth that had nothing to do with magic, and everything to do with the simple, human kindness of a stranger. "Rest now," he said, his voice a soothing balm on her frayed nerves. "You are safe here." And as she finally succumbed to the darkness of exhaustion, her last thought was that, for the first time in a very long time, she believed it. She was safe. And perhaps, just perhaps, she had stumbled upon something far more valuable than the power she had been so desperately seeking. She had stumbled upon a mystery. A man who was more than a man, a sage who commanded the very essence of the world. And she, Charmcaster, was nothing if not a woman who loved a good mystery. The tea, hot, brought a faint smile to her lips as she drifted off to sleep, the scent of moon blossoms and the feeling of strong arms around her the last things she remembered. The valley, and its enigmatic guardian, had claimed her. At least for now, and for the first time in a very long time, she didn't mind one bit. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Language of Creation. Sunlight, dappled and soft, was the first thing to greet Charmcaster's senses. It wasn't the harsh, unfiltered glare of a normal sun, but a gentle, diffused radiance that seemed to filter through a canopy of living jade. The air she breathed was crisp and pure, carrying the scent of damp earth, blooming flowers, and something else, a clean, electric tang, like the air after a thunderstorm, but without the preceding violence. It felt alive, invigorating. A stark contrast to the stale, recycled air of her pocket dimensions or the acrid stench of sulfur that so often accompanied powerful magics. She pushed herself up, her muscles aching in protest. A dull throb in her ribs a testament to her desperate flight and violent arrival. The simple, homespun fabric of the robe she now wore was surprisingly soft against her skin, a far cry from the restrictive, dark leather and silk she favored. Her own attire, torn and bloodied, was nowhere in sight. She was not in a bed, but rather a raised dais of interwoven, living roots, cushioned by a thick, velvety moss that seemed to hum with a faint, internal warmth. The chamber around her was a breathtaking display of organic architecture. It was a grotto, vast and cavernous, yet it felt anything but cold or empty. The walls were not stone, but the living, intertwined trunks of colossal trees, their bark smooth and silver, weaving together in a seamless, vaulted ceiling high above. Veins of phosphorescent moss pulsed with a gentle, rhythmic light, casting an ethereal glow that danced with the filtered sunlight from openings in the canopy far above. A stream of water, so clear it was almost invisible, flowed through the center of the grotto, its path lined with smooth, gray stones that seemed to have been placed by a master artist. The sound of its gentle burbling was a constant, soothing melody that filled the space with a sense of profound peace. This was not a house built in a forest. This was a house grown from the forest itself. A quiet footfall, barely a whisper on the mossy floor, drew her attention. Naruto stood near the entrance of the grotto, his back to her, tending to a collection of plants that grew in a spiral pattern on the cavern wall. He moved with the same unhurried, deliberate grace she had witnessed in the clearing. He wasn't watering them or pruning them in any conventional sense. Instead, his hand hovered a few inches above a budding flower, his fingers slightly curled. And she could see it, a faint, shimmering aura of pale gold light enveloping the plant. As she watched, the bud trembled and then, with a silent, breathtaking grace, unfurled its petals, revealing a flower of impossible, shifting colors, a living kaleidoscope. He had not forced it to bloom, he had encouraged it. He had spoken to it in a language it understood, a language of life itself. "You're awake," he said, without turning. His voice was as calm and clear as the stream that flowed through his home. "I thought you might be hungry." He turned then, a small, knowing smile on his lips. In his hands, he held a simple wooden bowl filled with a vibrant assortment of fruits and berries, some of which she had never seen before. Their colors were richer, their shapes more perfect than anything she had encountered. He approached her, his presence a zone of absolute tranquility, and offered the bowl. Charmcaster's pride, a fierce and stubborn thing, bristled. She was not some damsel to be tended to. She was a sorceress of immense power, a rival to the wielder of the Omnitrix. But the gnawing emptiness in her stomach, and the genuine, non-threatening kindness in his eyes, warred with her instincts. Hesitantly, she took the bowl. "Where are my things?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended, a defensive shield thrown up out of habit. "Your clothes air damaged and stained with the essence of that creature. I cleansed them of its taint, but they will need time to mend," he explained, gesturing to a flat, sun-drenched rock near the entrance where her familiar purple and black garments lay, seemingly stitching themselves back together with threads of pure light. "As for your bag of charms," he added, a hint of amusement in his tone, "it is safe. I felt it best not to disturb its energies. They are chaotic." He sat cross-legged on the floor a respectful distance from her, making no move to intrude on her space. He simply watched her, his gaze open and curious. It was unnerving. People looked at her with fear, with desire, with envy, never with this simple, unclouded curiosity. She took a berry from the bowl. It was a deep, vibrant crimson, and felt warm to the touch. As she bit into it, her eyes widened. A burst of flavor exploded on her tongue, sweet and tart and a dozen other things she couldn't name. It was more than just taste. She could feel a wave of warmth spreading through her, easing the ache in her muscles, clearing the fog from her mind. It was as if she were ingesting pure life. "What is this?" she asked, her voice softer now, tinged with grudging awe. "Just fruit," Naruto replied with a shrug. "It grows well here. The valley is generous to those who listen to it." "Listen to it," Charmcaster scoffed, regaining a sliver of her usual arrogance. "Land doesn't speak. It is a thing to be commanded, to be shaped by a will strong enough to bend it." She gestured with a flick of her wrist, her mind reaching for the familiar incantations. The conduits of power that had served her for years. She intended to levitate a stone from the stream, a simple cantrip to reassert her own power, her own control. Nothing happened. She frowned, focusing her will, her voice whispering a sibilant word of power. "Levitas." The air around the stone shimmered weakly, a faint purple aura flickering into existence for a fraction of a second before fizzling out like a dying spark. The stone remained stubbornly, infuriatingly, at the bottom of the stream. A cold knot of fear tightened in her gut. Was her magic gone? "It's not gone," Naruto said, his voice gentle, as if he had heard her unspoken panic. "It's just trying to shout in a library." He stood and walked to the stream, his bare feet making no sound on the moss. "Your magic, from what I can perceive, is an act of imposition. You gather energy, raw and unfocused, and you force it to obey your will. You carve your desires onto the world." He dipped his hand into the water, and the stream seemed to greet him, the current swirling around his fingers like a playful cat. "Here, in this valley, the world has its own voice. A very strong one. It doesn't respond well to being shouted at." He looked at one of the smooth, gray stones she had failed to move. He didn't chant or gesture. He simply looked at it, and Charmcaster felt it, a subtle shift in the energy of the grotto. A hum that resonated deep in her bones. It wasn't a command, it was a request. A silent, wordless communication. The stone lifted from the water, trailing droplets of liquid crystal, and hovered in the air before him, spinning gently. "I did not command it to rise," Naruto explained, his eyes never leaving the floating stone. "I asked it to. I felt its nature, its connection to the earth, its slight resistance to the flow of the water, and I presented it with a new possibility, the freedom of the air. It found the proposition agreeable." He opened his hand, and the stone floated over to her, hovering before her face for a moment before gently settling into her open palm. It was warm, and it seemed to vibrate with a faint, content energy. Charmcaster stared at the stone, then back at Naruto, her mind reeling. This was a philosophy of power so alien to her that it bordered on absurd. Magic, as she knew it, was a battle. A struggle to wrest control from the chaotic forces of the universe. Hex had taught her that power was taken, never given. Legerdemain, her home, was a realm of constant magical conflict, where the strong dominated the weak. This was something else entirely. You talk to rocks." The question came out sounding more incredulous and childish than she'd intended. A genuine laugh escaped him, a warm, pleasant sound that echoed softly in the grotto. To everything, he corrected. The trees, the water, the wind, the light. Even the silence has a voice, if you know how to listen. This is the nature of mana. It is not a force to be wielded, but a conversation to be had. It is the lifeblood of existence, the connection between all things. What you call magic, and what the shinobi of this land call chakra, are just dialects. Ways of speaking a single word of that language. You shout, they write symbols in the air with their hands. I simply speak. He walked towards the center of the grotto, his bare feet leaving no impression on the moss. He extended his hands, palms up, and closed his eyes. Let me show you. The energy in the grotto shifted dramatically. Before, it had been a calm, ambient presence. Now, it was a rushing river, palpable force that made the air thicken and the light intensify. The phosphorescent moss on the walls pulsed in unison, their light brightening from a gentle glow to a radiant beacon. The water in the stream began to flow upwards, forming a swirling, crystalline sphere of water that hovered in the air above Naruto's head. From the ground, tiny seeds, previously unseen, sprouted at an impossible rate, growing into intricate, flowering vines that climbed his arms and legs, weaving a living tapestry of green leaves and vibrant blossoms around him. The very air coalesced, forming shimmering, hummy, bird-like constructs of pure mana that flitted around his head before dissolving into motes of light. Charmcaster felt like a child seeing the ocean for the first time. The sheer scale of his control, the absolute harmony of it, was terrifying and beautiful in equal measure. He wasn't straining, wasn't chanting, wasn't burning through some internal reservoir of power. He was conducting a symphony, and the entire valley was his orchestra. He was not a sorcerer using magic, he was a part of the world, and the world was expressing itself through him. He lowered his hands, and as quickly as it had begun, the display subsided. The water fell back into the stream without a splash, the vines receded into the earth, and the light returned to its former gentle ambiance. He opened his eyes, and Ey seemed to hold the ancient wisdom of the forest itself. This is the power of a sage, he said, his voice quiet but firm. To be in harmony with the true nature of mana. To understand that you are not separate from the world, but a part of it. A very important, very powerful part. Charmcaster was silent for a long time, the warm stone still clutched in her hand. Everything she had ever learned, everything she had ever strived for, seemed so crude, so primitive in comparison. Her ambition had always been to accumulate more power, to learn more spells, to gather more artifacts, so she could dominate her enemies. So no one could ever control her again. Naruto's power wasn't about domination. It was about connection, unity. Why? She finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why are you showing me this? Why help me? You don't know me. The portal you opened was a wound, he replied, his expression turning serious. It hurt the valley. The creature that followed you was a poison. I healed the wound and purged the poison. You were simply caught in the middle. As for why I am showing you this, it is because you, more than most, have the potential to understand. Your spirit is strong, and it reaches for power. But it has been taught to clench its fist and take. I wonder what it might accomplish if it learned to open its hand and receive. His words struck a chord deep within her, an uncomfortable truth she had long ignored. Her quest for power had been a lonely one, a path paved with betrayal and suspicion. She trusted no one, relied on no one. Hex had used her. Her rivals sought to destroy her. Even the so-called heroes saw her as just another villain to be defeated. This man, this sage, had shown her more power than she had ever dreamed of, and then had offered her a lesson. An alternative. It was disorienting. I need to get back to my own world, she said, deflecting, falling back on her immediate goals. There are things I must do. People I have to deal with. Revenge on her uncle was a fire that had fueled her for years, and it would not be so easily extinguished. Naruto nodded, accepting her statement without judgment. Crossing dimensions is not a simple task. The tear you created was born of desperation, it was unstable. To create a stable gateway, one that leads precisely where you wish, requires immense energy and a deep understanding of the pathways between worlds. Your power is weakened here, and you are injured. You will need to recover both your strength and your connection to your magic. And I suppose you're the only one who can help me with that? She asked, a touch of her old sarcasm returning. Perhaps, he said with that infuriatingly calm smile. Or perhaps you can learn to listen to the valley yourself. It is a patient teacher. He left her then, retreating to a different part of the grotto to meditate, leaving Charmcaster alone with her thoughts, the bowl of life-giving fruit, and the warm, humming stone in her hand. She looked around at the living cavern, at the impossible beauty and tranquility of it all. It was a prison, in a way, a gilded cage where her powers were neutered. But it was also the safest place she had ever been. There were no political intrigues, no backstabbing rivals, no monstrous guardians. There was only the valley, and its enigmatic master. For days, a routine established itself. Naruto would provide her with food, each meal a new and wondrous experience that healed her body and sharpened her mind. He would spend long hours in silent communion with the valley, sometimes sitting motionless for an entire day. Other times moving through the forest with a purpose she couldn't discern. He never pushed her, never demanded anything of her. He simply existed, a constant, powerful presence. Charmcaster, in turn, spent her time trying to reclaim her magic. She found that Naruto was right. When she tried to force her will, to command the elements, she was met with a stubborn, unyielding resistance. The very air felt thick, the earth heavy, but when she followed his advice, when she sat quietly and tried to listen, she began to feel it. The subtle currents of mana flowing through the grotto, the life energy of the plants. The patient, ancient consciousness of the stone. It was like trying to learn a language without a dictionary, frustrating and slow, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of understanding. She managed to make a single flower petal twitch, not by force, but by aligning her will with its desire to turn towards the light. It was a tiny, insignificant achievement, yet it felt more profound than any destructive spell she had ever cast. One afternoon, as she was meditating by the stream, she felt a new presence. It was not Naruto. It was something wild, ancient, and immensely powerful. She opened her eyes to see a great fox, larger than a horse, with fur the color of molten gold and 9 long, elegant tails swaying behind it. Its eyes were intelligent, ancient, and held a glint of mischievous wisdom. It regarded her not as a threat, but as a curiosity, an oddity in its domain. Before she could react, Naruto was there, placing a calming hand on the great fox's head. "Kurama," he said, his voice filled with a familiar affection. "This is our guest. Her name is Charmcaster." The fox, Kurama, gave a rumbling chuff that was not quite a growl, his gaze still locked on her. Then, a voice echoed not in her ears, but directly in her mind, a voice deep and resonant, laced with a dry wit. "She smells of ozone and ambition. A troublesome combination." Charmcaster shot to her feet, her hand instinctively reaching for the charm bag that was still mending itself. A telepathic, 9-tailed fox. What fresh madness was this? "She is lost, my friend," Naruto said, still stroking the fox's fur. "And she is learning a new way." Kurama snorted, a gust of wind rustling the leaves in the grotto. "The only way her kind learns is the hard way. Be mindful, Naruto. The world outside this valley has not changed. It is still filled with those who would take, not ask." The great fox gave her one last, appraising look, then turned and padded silently out of the grotto, disappearing into the dense forest as if he were a phantom. Charmcaster stared after him, her heart still pounding. "What was that?" "A friend," Naruto said simply. "The oldest friend I have. He is the guardian of this valley. Its heart and its spirit, in many ways." This place was more than just a magical sanctuary. It was a world unto itself, with its own rules, its own inhabitants, its own king. A king who spoke to rocks, befriended mythical beasts, and commanded the very essence of creation with a gentle request. Her own world, with its power struggles and dark ambitions, felt a million miles away. And for the first time, she wasn't entirely sure she was in a hurry to get back. She looked at Naruto, at the quiet strength in his eyes, at the impossible harmony he embodied, and she felt a stirring of something new. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't just respect. It was a deep, burning curiosity. She wanted to understand. She wanted to learn. "Teach me," she said, the words surprising her as they left her lips. Her voice was firm, devoid of her usual arrogance. "Teach me how to listen." Naruto looked at her, and for the first time, his calm, serene smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners in a display of genuine warmth and approval. The first lesson, he said, his voice resonating with the quiet power of the valley, is silence. He sat down across from her, crossing his legs and closing his eyes. A silent invitation. After a moment's hesitation, Charmcaster did the same. She closed her eyes, shut out the world of sight and ambition, and for the first time in her life, she truly, honestly, began to listen. The stream, the wind, the leaves, the light, the beating of her own heart, it was all part of the same song. And she was, at last, beginning to hear the melody. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Ripples on a still pond. The silence was the hardest part. For Charmcaster, a woman whose life had been a cacophony of crackling spells, whispered incantations, and the constant, simmering monologue of her own ambition, true silence was a foreign country. Naruto's first lesson had stretched into weeks, and it had been an exercise in maddening subtlety. There were no lectures on theory, no grand demonstrations of power after that first, breathtaking display. His method of teaching was one of quiet immersion. He would lead her to a waterfall that cascaded into a placid lake and simply say, "The water wishes to be still. The waterfall wishes to fall. They are not at odds. Feel the balance." Then he would leave her for hours, to sit and simply be. He had her hold a fistful of soil and feel the patient, dormant life within the seeds it contained, urging her not to force them, but to offer them the warmth of her own life force as an invitation to grow. Progress was agonizingly slow, measured in the twitch of a leaf, the momentary calming of a ripple, the faintest warmth from a seed that did not sprout. Every instinct she possessed screamed at her to impose her will, to channel raw power and demand results. But every time she did, the valley would push back, the air growing heavy, the life around her receding as if shying away from a dissonant note. It was a humbling, infuriating, and undeniably profound experience. She was beginning to understand that the mana Naruto spoke of wasn't a well to be drawn from, but a current to join. It was the difference between building a dam to redirect a river and learning to swim with its flow. The latter, she was discovering, required a strength her old life had never taught her, the strength of surrender. She was meditating on a large, sun-warmed boulder overlooking the valley, a tapestry of 1,000 shades of green stretching out below her. She was trying to feel the subtle shift in the air currents, to anticipate the path of a falling leaf not through calculation, but through a shared sense of gravity. For a fleeting, miraculous moment, she felt it. A connection, a sense of being not just on the rock, but of the wind, of the sunlight. She knew, with an unshakable certainty, that a gust of wind would rise from the west in precisely 3 seconds. It did, rustling her silver hair exactly as she had foreseen. A small, genuine smile graced her lips. It was a victory more satisfying than transmuting lead into gold. It was in that moment of profound connection that she felt the intrusion. It was a jarring, violent ripple in the tranquil pond of the valley's energy. It was sharp, aggressive, and reeked of bloodlust and desperation. It was the energy signature of a predator, wounded but still dangerous. It was nothing like the corrupted wrongness of the demon she had fled, but it was just as alien to this sanctuary. It was the energy of a human, but a human honed into a living weapon. Naruto appeared beside her, his movement as silent as the settling of dust. He had not walked or run, he had simply arrived. His serene expression was gone, replaced by a focused, neutral mask. His sky-blue eyes were fixed on a point in the dense forest to the north. "Stay here," he said, his voice flat, containing a command not of authority, but of undeniable logic. This was not a conversation. He was a physician about to excise a tumor, and her presence would be a complication. Before she could protest, he was gone, dissolving into a swirl of leaves that were caught by the wind and scattered. Charmcaster's heart hammered in her chest. A part of her, the part that was growing accustomed to the peace, that was finding a strange comfort in her reliance on the valley's master, wanted to obey. But the old Charmcaster, the proud, defiant sorceress who bowed to no one, bristled at the command. More than that, a fierce, protective instinct she hadn't known she possessed flared to life. This was her sanctuary now. In a way, this man, this enigma, had saved her, and was teaching her a truth about power she never knew existed. The thought of something or someone threatening him, was intolerable. With a curse at her own foolishness, she scrambled down from the boulder and ran towards the direction of the disturbance, her mended, dark robes a stark slash of pure ple against the vibrant green of the forest. The scene she came upon was one of controlled chaos. In a small clearing, a woman with wild, spiky, violet-colored hair was backed against the trunk of an ancient, gnarled tree. She was clad in a standard-issue flak jacket of a design Charmcaster didn't recognize, though it was torn and stained with blood, both her own and that of others. Her face was a mask of feral desperation, her eyes darting around, searching for an escape that didn't exist. Her body was a taut wire of aggression, a kunai held in a reverse grip in one hand, her other hand a blur, as it formed a series of intricate signs. And she was utterly, completely, trapped. Thick, living roots had erupted from the ground, forming a cage around her that was both impassable and non-threatening. They didn't crush or constrict, but simply existed, a barrier of patient, unyielding life. Dozens of ethereal, blue-green butterflies, constructs of pure mana, flitted around her, their wings leaving trails of sparkling dust. Charmcaster knew instinctively that these were not mere illusions, they were extensions of Naruto's will, sensors that tracked her every movement, her every twitch. Naruto stood in the center of the clearing. His arms crossed, his expression one of deep disappointment, like a master craftsman observing a beautifully made tool being used to smash rocks. "Your techniques are impressive," he stated, his voice calm, cutting through the woman's ragged breathing. "They are sharp, efficient, and utterly devoid of meaning. You are screaming at the forest, and it is politely asking you to lower your voice." The woman spat a glob of blood onto the mossy ground. "Don't give me your philosophical bullshit," she snarled, her voice a low, dangerous rasp. "I don't know who you are or what this place is, but you're in my way. Let me go, or I'll carve my way out of this overgrown terrarium and take you with me." "Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu," she roared, her hands completing their seals. She inhaled deeply, her chest puffing out, and unleashed a massive fireball, a roaring inferno that should have incinerated the entire clearing. It was an awesome display of power. The fireball roared towards Naruto, superheating the air, turning the moisture to steam. Charmcaster instinctively threw up a weak, flickering shield of purple energy, but it was unnecessary. Naruto didn't move, he simply raised one hand, palm forward. As the inferno was about to engulf him, the stream that ran nearby changed its course. With a surge that defied gravity, a wall of water rose from the stream, meeting the fireball with a hiss that shook the clearing. A colossal cloud of steam billowed upwards, obscuring everything for a moment. When it cleared, Naruto was untouched. The wild-haired woman, however, was gasping, her bravado momentarily shattered by the casual, overwhelming display of elemental control. "You are a shinobi of Konohagakure," Naruto said, not as a question, but as a statement. He had seen the symbol on her headband, which was tied around her thigh. "Your name is Anko Mitarashi. You were tracking a missing nin by the name of Orochimaru. He led you into a trap. Your team is dead. You have been running for 3 days, sustained by soldier pills and sheer stubbornness. You are exhausted, poisoned, and bleeding internally. If you attempt one more technique of that magnitude, your own chakra coils will rupture and you will die." Anko stared at him, her feral defiance replaced by stunned shock, then a dawning horror. It wasn't just that he knew her situation, it was the way he knew it. He hadn't interrogated her, hadn't found some discarded scroll. He had simply, read it. Read it from the way she held herself, from the taint in her energy, from the frantic, desperate pulse of her chakra. "How?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "The valley told me," Naruto said simply. "It felt your pain, your desperation. It also feels the poison that snake-themed shinobi injected into you. A clever, slow-acting neurotoxin designed to make your own chakra betray you. It is killing you, Anko Mitarashi." The fight seemed to drain out of her all at once. The kunai slipped from her numb fingers. Her legs gave out, and she slumped against the tree trunk, her body trembling not with rage, but with the onset of shock and exhaustion. The cage of roots receded back into the earth as smoothly as they had appeared, and the mana butterflies dissolved into motes of light. The threat was over. It was then that Anko noticed Charmcaster, who was hovering at the edge of the clearing. Her expression a mixture of awe and something else, a strange, protective indignation. Anko's eyes narrowed, her shinobi instinct screaming. An unknown. A potential threat. Who's the freak in the goth costume? She rasped, her ingrained hostility a shield against her own vulnerability. She is a guest, Naruto said, his voice leaving no room for argument as he walked towards Anko. He knelt before her, his presence radiating a calm that was the antithesis of her entire being. As are you, for now. I don't need your help, Anko snarled, trying to slap his hand away as he reached for her. It was a pathetic gesture, lacking any of its previous fire. Naruto's hand was not deterred. He gently placed his palm over the wound on her side, a nasty gash that was weeping a dark, sluggish blood. Stubbornness is a virtue in your profession, he said, his voice softening with a hint of sympathy. But it is a poor physician. Allow me. A soft, green light emanated from his palm. It was not the harsh, clinical light of medical ninjutsu that Anko was familiar with. This was a warm, living light, like sunlight filtering through new spring leaves. She felt it seep into her body, a wave of pure, untainted life. It didn't just stitch her flesh back together, it soothed the frayed edges of her nerves, pushed back the encroaching exhaustion, and, most miraculously, began to wage a gentle, inexorable war against the insidious poison snaking through her veins. The pain that had been her constant companion for days began to recede, replaced by a warm, tingling sensation. It was a feeling so foreign and so welcome that tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, much to her own disgust and fury. She was not a woman who cried. Charmcaster watched the entire exchange with a hawk-like intensity. She saw the raw, violent power of the shinobi, a power born of discipline and a will to kill. She saw Naruto negate it without effort, without malice. And she saw him heal this hostile, abrasive woman with a gentleness that was almost parental. A complicated knot of emotions twisted in her gut. She felt a surge of possessiveness. This was her teacher, her savior. This quiet valley was her refuge. The arrival of this feral creature, disrupted everything. It introduced a harshness, a violence, that had no place here. And yet, she also felt a strange kinship with the woman. Both of them were outsiders, powerful in their own right, who had stumbled into the domain of something far greater. Naruto eventually drew his hand back. The wound on Anko's side was closed, the skin smooth and unblemished, though the torn, bloody hole in her uniform remained. The poison was not gone, but it had been pacified, forced into a dormant state by the overwhelming vitality of Naruto's mana. It will take time to purge it completely, he explained, rising to his feet. You will need to rest. Here, he turned and began to walk back towards the direction of his grotto. He didn't look back, didn't check to see if she was following. He knew she would. She had no other choice. Her mission was a failure. She was deep in unknown territory, and her only hope for survival was the very man she had tried to incinerate moments before. With a groan, Anko pushed herself to her feet. Her body was still weak, but the immediate threat of death had passed. She shot a venomous glare at Charmcaster. A look that promised retribution for the goth costume comment, before limping after Naruto. Charmcaster, in turn, returned a haughty, disdainful stare before falling into step behind them, keeping a calculated distance. The walk back was a symphony of silent tension. Anko, the hardened shinobi, was on high alert, her eyes scanning every shadow, her ears twitching at every sound, trying to map out this strange, new territory. She was a weapon in an art gallery, her very presence a discordant note. Charmcaster was sullen and withdrawn, observing the newcomer with a mixture of suspicion and a jealousy she refused to acknowledge. Naruto walked ahead of them both, a pillar of calm in the emotional storm he had created, seemingly oblivious to the daggers the two women were staring into each other's backs. When they reached the entrance to the living grotto, Anko's jaw dropped. She had seen the first Hokages would release techniques in history scrolls, but this was something else entirely. This wasn't a technique, it was a living, breathing home, a place of impossible beauty and power. Her shinobi mind immediately began calculating its strategic value, its defensibility, its resource potential. This place, and the man who commanded it, could change the balance of power in the elemental nations. Naruto led her to a dais of moss on the opposite side of the grotto from where Charmcaster had first awoken, creating a clear demarcation of territory. He provided her with a bowl of the same life-giving fruit, which she eyed with deep suspicion before her hunger won out. She devoured it like a starving animal, her eyes never leaving Naruto or Charmcaster. The first meal they shared was an affair of crushing silence. Anko sat with her back against the grotto wall, a position that gave her a clear view of both exits. Her body coiled and ready for a fight despite her weakened state. Charmcaster sat on her own dais, nibbling at a piece of fruit with deliberate, aristocratic slowness, her posture exuding an air of royal displeasure. Naruto sat between them by the stream, seemingly lost in his own thoughts, a placid island in a sea of animosity. Finally, Anko broke the silence, her voice still rough. "So, what's the deal, sunshine?" She directed at Naruto, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "You some kind of hermit? A missing nin who went native? What do you want from me?" "I want you to heal," Naruto replied without opening his eyes. "That is all. People don't do things for free," Anko shot back, the cynicism of her world ingrained in her very soul. "What's your price?" "Information. A favor. You want me to work for you." "My price," Naruto said, a hint of weariness in his voice, "is that while you are a guest in this valley, you will treat it with respect. You will not try to kill its inhabitants. You will not try to burn down its trees, and you will not poison its air with pointless hostility. Your world and its rules have no meaning here. Here, there is only one rule. Live in harmony, or leave." "And if I choose not to?" Anko challenged, a glint of the old fire in her eyes. Naruto finally opened his eyes and looked at her. It wasn't a threatening look, but it held the weight of the entire valley. The ancient patience of the mountains and the unstoppable force of a river. "You are a shinobi," he said. "You of all people should know the futility of fighting a battle you cannot possibly win. Rest, Anko Mitarashi, heal, and then we will speak of what comes next." He stood and retreated to a secluded alcove to meditate, leaving the two women alone in the vast, silent grotto. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other across the bubbling stream. One was a sorceress from a realm of chaotic magic, a woman of ambition and intellect, now humbled and learning a new path. The other was a warrior from a world of spies and assassins, a creature of instinct and violence, now broken and forced into stillness. They were from different universes, different cultures, with utterly opposing personalities. They had nothing in common, save for one monumental fact. They were both now captive guests of the Sage of the Silent Flow, a man who defied every definition of power they had ever known. Anko finally broke the staring contest, leaning her head back against the living wood of the grotto wall and letting out a long, weary sigh. Her body was healing, but her mind was in turmoil. This place, this man, they made no sense. But she was alive, and for a shinobi, that was the only currency that mattered. For now, she would play by his rules. She would watch, she would learn, and she would wait for an opportunity. She glanced over at the silver-haired sorceress, who was now pointedly ignoring her, pretending to be fascinated by the patterns in the moss. Yeah, Anko thought with a grim smirk. This was going to be interesting. The quiet pond of the valley had been disturbed, and the ripples were just beginning to spread. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Dissonance of 3. The first light of dawn in the Valley of the Silent Flow was not an event, but a process. It did not break over the mountains, it seeped into the world, a slow, gentle infusee on of gold and rose that stirred the air and woke the sleeping blossoms. For Anko Mitarashi, it was an assault. She came awake with the jarring, ingrained suddenness of a soldier on the front lines, her body tensing from a dead sleep to combat readiness in a single, silent heartbeat. Her hand reflexively twitched for the kunai pouch that wasn't there. The disorientation lasted only a second, replaced by a cold, methodical flood of memory. The failed mission, the ambush, the deaths of her team, the poison, the desperate flight, the cage of roots, and the impossible man with eyes the color of the sky. Her gaze swept the grotto. Her shinobi training automatically dissecting the space not as a home, but as a tactical environment. The single large entrance was a kill zone. The secondary opening, high in the living ceiling offered potential escape routes, but were impractical for a stealthy exit. The stream was a source of water but also an acoustic mask, its gentle burbling capable of covering the sound of movement. The phosphorescent moss provided low, constant illumination, eliminating deep shadows where an enemy could hide. Her professional assessment was swift and bleak. This place was a natural fortress, beautiful, serene, and utterly inescapable if its master wished it so. And its master was a problem she couldn't begin to quantify. Across the grotto, on another raised dais of living moss, the silver-haired woman, Charmcaster, was already awake. She wasn't training, wasn't sharpening weapons, wasn't doing anything Anko would recognize as productive. She was sitting stock still, legs crossed, eyes closed. Her posture one of serene concentration. A fool's posture, Anko thought with a sneer. Completely open, utterly vulnerable. It had to be a feint, a trick to lure an opponent into a false sense of security. No one with an ounce of self-preservation was ever that relaxed. Anko's body ached, a deep, cellular weariness that the miraculous healing had not entirely erased. She could still feel a phantom echo of the poison, a cold slickness in her veins that made her skin crawl. The man, Naruto, had said it was dormant, not gone. A part of her, the paranoid, cynical part forged in Konoha's Anbu, whispered that it was a leash. He had saved her life, yes, but he had also left a key in the lock. He could turn the poison back on whenever he wished. It was a perfectly logical, tactically sound move. It was exactly what she would have done. This line of thought was a cold comfort, a familiar blanket of suspicion in a world that made no sense. She rose, her movements stiff but quiet, and began a series of slow, deliberate stretches, cataloging her body's responses. Her chakra pathways felt clearer, less clogged than they had in years, a side effect of the sage's healing she hadn't anticipated. Even the lingering taint of Orochimaru's cursed seal, a shadow that had clung to her for a decade, felt diminished. Quieter. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. It had nothing to do with the morning chill. Who was this man, who could so casually mend things a Sannin had broken? Her restless energy could not be contained. She needed to move, to patrol, to establish a perimeter. She began to pace the edges of the grotto, her bare feet silent on the mossy floor, her eyes cataloging every detail. She found her flak jacket and pouches, cleaned and neatly folded on a stone shelf. The fabric was not just clean, it was repaired. Rips and tears from kunai and shrapnel were gone, the threads seamlessly rewoven. She ran her fingers over a spot where a blade had pierced her side. It was perfect. Not even the finest logistical core in Konoha could mend battle damage so flawlessly. It was another piece of a puzzle that was growing more complex and unnerving with every passing moment. Your ceaseless agitation is disturbing the resonance of the morning, a cool, aristocratic voice stated. Anko stopped pacing and turned. Charmcaster's eyes were open, and the why were fixed on her with an expression of mild disdain, as if she were a particularly noisy insect. And you're sitting there like a statue is giving me the creeps, Anko retorted, her voice a low rasp. What's your angle, princess? You his student, his prisoner, or just the resident weirdo? Charmcaster rose to her feet in a single, fluid motion, a stark contrast to Anko's own pragmatic, angular movements. I am here to learn, she said. Her chin tilted at a haughty angle. I am a student of a philosophy your primitive, violent mind could not begin to comprehend. We are learning to listen to the world, not simply trying to stab it into submission. Anko let out a short, harsh laugh. Listen to the world, right? I've listened to the world my whole life, lady. It screams, it bleeds, and it dies. If you're not the one holding the knife, you're the one on the ground bleeding out. That's the only philosophy that matters. She took a step closer, her body language shifting into something more confrontational. So let's try again. You're a student. What's he teaching you? How to grow a house? How to talk to butterflies? Or is he teaching you how to neutralize a Jonin-level shinobi without breaking a sweat? Because that's a lesson I'm interested in. The power he commands is not a lesson to be learned like one of your crude assassination techniques, Charmcaster sniffed, refusing to be intimidated. It is an awakening. It is about harmony, not brute force. He is a sage. I am a sorceress. We are dealing with the fundamental forces of creation. You are a blunt instrument. This blunt instrument has survived ambushes by S-rank criminals, Anko snarled, her hand instinctively moving to where her kunai pouch should be. While you were probably learning which fork to use at dinner. Don't mistake my being alive for being stupid. There's always a game, always an angle. And I'm going to figure out what his is. And yours. The tension in the grotto crackled, two opposing forces grinding against each other. Enko's energy was a coiled serpent, all sharp edges and contained violence. Charmcaster's was a wall of glacial pride, cool, condescending, and unyielding. The very air seemed to grow thick with their mutual animosity. Perhaps a demonstration of your respective philosophies is in order. Naruto's voice cut through the tension, calm and clear. He hadn't been in the grotto a moment before. Now he stood by the stream, holding two woven baskets. He looked at them not with disapproval, but with the patient air of a teacher observing two particularly difficult, but promising, students. Your hostility is a testament to your strength, he said, nodding to Anko. It has kept you alive. And your pride is a testament to your power, he added, his gaze shifting to Charmcaster. It has driven you to seek more. But both are walls, and a wall can be a fortress or a prison, depending on which side you're on. He set the baskets down. Anko, the poison in your system is contained, but it must be purged. Its roots are deep, entwined with your chakra coils. To dissolve it completely requires an herb known as Sun Dancer. It is a potent neutralizer, but it is fragile. It must be picked at midday, when its petals are open to the sky, and it must be fresh. He turned to Charmcaster. You have been learning to feel the life force of the valley. This is your first practical exam. The Sun Dancer grows only in one place, on the silent ledges, behind the veil of mists. He looked back and forth between them, his placid expression making it clear this was not a suggestion. You will go together. You will fill these baskets. And you will return before sunset. Anko requires the herb to fully heal. Charmcaster requires the practice to truly learn. It was a brilliant, infuriatingly simple solution. He had given them a shared goal, a mission. He had framed it in terms that appealed to both of them. For Anko, a tangible objective critical to her survival, for Charmcaster, a test of her new skills and a chance to prove her superiority. Refusal was not an option. Fine, Anko grunted, snatching one of the baskets. But if she slows me down with her flower-gazing nonsense, I'm leaving her behind. And if she attempts to solve the problem by throwing sharpened bits of metal at it, I will not be held responsible for the consequences, Charmcaster replied icily, Pi. Seeking up the other basket with a delicate grace that was in itself a rebuke to Anko's brusqueness. Naruto simply smiled. The path will teach you what you need to know. Try to listen. The journey began as a silent contest of wills. Anko, in her element, took the lead. She moved with a liquid efficiency that Charmcaster, for all her disdain, had to admire. Her feet seemed to barely touch the ground, her senses were a constant sweeping radar, assessing every snapped twig, every bird call, every shift in the wind. She saw the forest as a series of threats and opportunities. A thick vine was a potential snare. A dense thicket was an ambush point. A high branch was a vantage point. She moved with the grim purpose of a soldier navigating a minefield. Charmcaster followed, feeling clumsy and loud by comparison. She was trying to follow Naruto's instruction, to feel the flow of the valley, to let the path reveal itself. But Anko's tense, aggressive energy was a constant distraction, a loud was that made it hard to hear the quieter music of the mana. Must you move as if you're expecting the trees themselves to attack you? She finally hissed, after Anko had paused for the 10th time to scan their surroundings. The day the trees don't attack you is the day you're already dead, Anko shot back over her shoulder without breaking stride. This place feels safe. That's what makes it dangerous. The most effective traps are the ones you walk into willingly. This isn't a trap, it's a sanctuary, Charmcaster argued. Your paranoia is poisoning the very air. My paranoia is called experience, princess. Something you seem to be short on. They continued in this vein, their clashing worldviews echoing in the tranquil forest. They passed through groves of trees that hummed with a soft, internal light and crossed streams whose water glittered with motes of pure energy. Anko saw defensible positions and choke points. Charmcaster saw a symphony of life she was struggling to comprehend. After another hour of tense hiking, they reached their destination. The veil of mists was a waterfall of immense size, crashing down a sheer cliff face into a deep, turquoise pool. The roar was deafening, and a perpetual cloud of thick, Cool mist shrouded the base of the cliff, making visibility near zero. The silent ledges, according to Naruto's brief description, were behind that wall of water. All right, this is a classic infiltration problem, Enko said, her voice taking on a professional, analytical tone. She dropped her basket and immediately began assessing the obstacle. The water is a physical barrier. The mist is a visual barrier. The noise is an auditory barrier. We can't see what's on the other side. Could be a sheer cliff face, could be a cave system, could be guarded. A direct approach is suicide. She started circling the pool, looking for handholds on the cliff face, for a way around. We could try to climb above it and rappel down, but we don't have the gear. A water-walking approach is possible, but the current at the base will be treacherous. Charmcaster ignored her, closing her eyes. She reached out with her senses, trying to push past the overwhelming physical sensations of the roaring water and the damp mist. She tried to listen, as Naruto had taught her. At first, all she felt was the raw, immense power of the waterfall, a chaotic, churning energy. But beneath that, there was something else, a faint, chiming hum, a resonance that was gentle, playful, and protective. There are guardians, she said, opening her eyes. Enko scoffed. No kidding. There are always guardians, not shinobi. Charmcaster clarified, a hint of frustration in her voice. They are not physical. They're spirits, creatures of pure mana. They are tied to the waterfall. They are the reason the mist is so thick. She focused, trying to get a clearer sense of them. They're mischievous. They don't want to cause harm, but they will not allow anyone to pass who brings conflict or aggression. Enko gave her a skeptical look. Mana spirits. Great. So how do we kill them? You cannot kill them, Charmcaster exclaimed, exasperated. That is the entire point. They are a part of this place. Your approach, your entire mindset, is the very thing they are guarding against. To them, you are a disease. Okay, fine, Your Highness, Enko mocked, making a low bow. What's your brilliant plan? We asked them nicely. Sing them a song. Before Charmcaster could retort, Enko decided to test her own theory. She drew a kunai. She had retrieved her weapons pouch, and hurled it with expert precision into the thickest part of the mist, aiming for where she estimated the rock face would be. The kunai vanished into the white wall. There was no clang of metal on rock. Instead, a high-pitched, musical giggle echoed from within the mist, and the kunai came flying back out, not as a weapon, but transformed. It was now a beautiful, intricate flower of pure, blue ice, which spun through the air before landing softly at Enko's feet and melting into a puddle of shimmering water. Enko stared at the puddle, then back at the mist, her jaw tight. She had been disarmed, not with force, but with whimsy. It was more infuriating than any counterattack. I told you, Charmcaster said, a note of smug satisfaction in her voice. Shut up, Enko growled. She tried a different tactic. A simple fire release jutsu, a small, controlled burst of flame designed to burn away the mist. The moment the flames touched the white veil, they were smothered, extinguished instantly with a sound like a wet sigh. And the mist seemed to grow even thicker in response. They were at an impasse. Enko's every instinct, every technique, was aggressive, and aggression was the one thing that would not work. Charmcaster, while understanding the nature of the problem, lacked the fine control to communicate with the spirits. Her own attempts to project a calming aura were clumsy, tainted by her own frustration and her residual animosity towards Enko. They were both failing. They retreated to the edge of the pool, sitting on opposite sides of a large boulder, stewing in a frustrated silence broken only by the roar of the falls. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The shared failure was a bitter pill, but it had also broken through their mutual hostility, leaving a vacuum filled with a grudging acknowledgement of their predicament. My whole team, Enko said suddenly, her voice low, directed at the water rather than at Charmcaster. Gone. 1 minute, we were tracking Orochimaru's trail. The next, it was a symphony of traps. Explosive tags, poison gas, Earth-style ambushes. He picked us apart. Genma, Rado, good men. Better shinobi than me. They died because I, the team leader, walked them into the slaughterhouse. She picked up a small stone and skipped it across the pool. It sank without a ripple. I survived because I was the only one he wanted alive. He left me with that poison as a parting gift. A little experiment to see how long I'd last. Charmcaster was silent. She had no frame of reference for this kind of loss, this soldier's guilt. Her own struggles had always been solitary, a battle for her own power. Her own survival. She had never been part of a team, never felt the weight of responsibility for others. I am sorry, she said, the words feeling inadequate even to her own ears. Don't be, Enko grunted. Sorry doesn't bring them back. It's just a reminder that I failed. She looked over at Charmcaster, her expression stripped of its usual sarcasm. This plaque, your sage, he healed the wound in my side in seconds. But that's the wound that'll kill me. In that moment of raw honesty, Charmcaster saw past the feral shinobi, past the abrasive, cynical warrior. She saw a woman carrying a burden heavier than any mountain. A woman who defined herself by her strength, and now saw only her own failure. And she felt an unexpected, unwelcome pang of empathy. My uncle, Charmcaster found herself saying, her own voice quieter than usual. Hex, he was my teacher, my only family after my father died. He taught me everything I know about magic. He also manipulated me, stole my power, tried to sacrifice me for his own ends. Everything I've done for years, becoming stronger, gathering artifacts, it was all for one purpose, to crush him. To prove I was more powerful than he ever was. She looked at her own hands. But here, Naruto talks of harmony, of connection. He has more power in his little finger than Hex has ever dreamed of, and he uses it to grow flowers. It makes my entire life's ambition feel small, pointless. They sat in the shared silence of their confessions. Two powerful women, forged in crucibles of betrayal and loss, suddenly finding themselves on common ground. They were both defined by their pasts, by the men who had hurt them, and now they were both confronted by a man who was challenging the very foundations of their existence. Harmony, Enko muttered, looking back at the waterfall. It's a nice idea, but it doesn't win wars. Perhaps it's not meant to, Charmcaster mused. A thought began to form in her mind, a fusion of their two disparate worldviews. You said this was an infiltration problem. You are right, but we are trying to breach the wall. What if we're supposed to get an invitation to pass through it? Enko raised an eyebrow. An invitation from the giggling mist monsters. They are not monsters, Charmcaster insisted, standing up. They are protectors. Your jutsu failed because it was fire. It is an act of consumption, of destruction. Your kunai failed because it was a weapon. What if we offer something else? Not an attack, or a request, but a gift. A gift, Enko asked skeptically. What do we have that they'd want? We have our own energy, Charmcaster said, her eyes alight with a new idea. My magic, your chakra. They are different, but they are both a form of life force. Naruto said they were different dialects of the same language. Your chakra is highly controlled, disciplined. Mine is more expressive, dissonant, here. But what if we combine them? Not as a weapon, but as an offering. A song in two-part harmony. It was a wild, absurd idea, born of desperation and a sliver of shared understanding. But it was the only idea they had left. Enko looked from Charmcaster's determined face to the impassable wall of mist, and gave a short, sharp nod. It's the stupidest plan I've ever heard, she said. Let's do it. They stood side by side at the edge of the pool. I will create a stable resonance. Charmcaster instructed, a carrier wave of pure, calm energy. It will be featureless, an open hand. You must then weave your chakra into it. Not as an attack, but as a pattern. Something intricate and disciplined, like your hand seals, but without the intent to destroy. Show them order. Show them control. Charmcaster closed her eyes. She reached out, not with force, but with the quiet focus she had been practicing for weeks. She projected a simple, steady hum of her own mana, a pale pink aura forming around her hands. It was the most basic, non-intrusive spell she could manage. Enko watched for a moment, then took a deep breath. This was antithetical to everything she knew. Chakra was a tool, a weapon. Using it without a destructive purpose was like ending a blade and then using it to spread butter. But she focused, channeling a small, steady stream of her own blue chakra to her fingertips. She began to move her hands, not in the rapid, aggressive signs of a jutsu, but in a slow, deliberate, almost dance-like pattern, mimicking the forms of a complex seal but without the final, activating surge of will. She wove her blue energy into Charmcaster's pink aura. The effect was immediate and astonishing. The two energies, one chaotic and magical, the other disciplined and spiritual, did not clash. They merged, creating a swirling, scintillating ribbon of violet light that pulsed with a gentle, hypnotic rhythm. It was beautiful, a perfect fusion of their two natures, Charmcaster's raw, expressive power given shape and form by Anko's disciplined control. The ribbon of light drifted from their hands and floated towards the veil of mists. The giggling of the spirits quieted, replaced by a collective sound of curious, chiming hums. The violet ribbon touched the mist, and instead of being repelled, it was absorbed, spreading through the white veil like dye in water. For a moment, the entire waterfall glowed with a soft, violet luminescence. Then, with a sound like a great, gentle sigh, the wall of water parted. It did not stop flowing, but rather split down the middle, creating a dry, clear pathway through the torrent that led directly to the rock face behind it. The mist cleared, revealing a series of narrow ledges carved into the cliff, upon which grew clusters of delicate, golden flowers whose petals seemed to follow the movement of the sun. Even through the tons of rock and water above them, the sun dancer herbs, Anko and Charmcaster stared, speechless. They had not defeated the Guardians. They had pleased them. They had created something beautiful. And the valley had responded by opening the way. Well, I'll be damned, Anko breathed. A new, unspoken truce formed between them. They worked in silence, Anko using her shinobi agility to navigate the slick ledges, carefully harvesting the delicate flowers, while Charmcaster maintained the harmonic aura that kept the path open. They filled their baskets, and as they stepped back out, the waterfall closed behind them as seamlessly as it had opened. They returned to the grotto just as the sun began to dip below the valley's rim. Naruto was waiting, sitting by the stream, a stone mortar and pestle laid out before him. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't ask them how they did it. He simply looked at the full baskets, and then at the two of them, and his calm, knowing smile was more praise than either of them had received in a very long time. As Naruto began to crush the herbs, preparing the final antidote, a shadow fell over the entrance of the grotto. Kurama, the great nine-tailed fox, padded silently into the chamber, his golden fur seeming to drink the twilight. He laid his great head down near the fire pit, his intelligent, ancient eyes fixing on Anko. "So, the little viper has survived." A voice boomed in her mind, deep and ancient and laced with a weary amusement. Anko froze, her hand flying to her hip. What was that?" she demanded, her eyes darting around. "That is Kurama," Naruto said calmly, not looking up from his work. "He is a friend. He means you no harm." Kurama let out a low, rumbling chuff. "Harm is the business of lesser creatures. I am merely an observer." His gaze on Anko was unnervingly perceptive. "You hunt the great white snake. A foolish endeavor. You believe him to be the predator, but he is merely a scavenger, shedding his skin and stealing the strength of others. He is a symptom, not a disease." The fox's mental voice lowered, becoming more serious. "Be mindful, shinobi. The snake you hunt may shed his skin, but he is still just a snake. This valley is the domain of a dragon. Do not mistake the nature of the power you have stumbled upon." The cryptic warning settled deep in Anko's bones. A dragon. It was a fitting description for the man who commanded the very earth and water. He wasn't just another powerful ninja. He was something else entirely, a force of nature on a scale she couldn't comprehend. Naruto finished his preparations. He held out a small, steaming wooden bowl to Anko. "Drink," he said. "This will purge the rest." Anko looked at the bowl, then at Naruto, then at the immense, telepathic fox resting by the fire. She looked at Charmcaster, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. Her entire world, her entire understanding of power and philosophy, had been turned upside down in the span of a single day. She took the bowl. The liquid was warm and smelled of sunlight and clean earth. She drank it down in a single gulp. The effect was instantaneous. A fire ignited in her veins, a pure, clean heat that spread to every cell in her body. It was not painful. It was a scouring, a purification. She could feel the last, stubborn remnants of Orochimaru's poison, the deep-seated taint on her chakra. Dissolving like smoke in the wind. Even the cursed seal on her neck, that hateful brand that had been a source of pain and weakness for so long, flared with a searing heat and then went silent. Truly silent. For the first time since it had been placed there. She felt clean. She felt whole. She dropped the empty bowl, her knees weak, and leaned against the grotto wall, taking a deep, shuddering breath. The air tasted sweeter. The light looked brighter. A weight she had carried for a decade had been lifted. She looked at Naruto, who was now calmly cleaning the mortar and pestle in the stream. All her suspicion, all her ingrained cynicism, was being washed away by a profound, disorienting wave of gratitude. He had saved her. He had healed her. He had freed her. Why? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Stripped of all its former bravado. Why all this for me? Naruto turned, his sky-blue eyes meeting hers. Because you were hurt, he said, as if it were the simplest, most obvious answer in the universe. And you came to my door. It is not a complicated philosophy. He was right. It wasn't complicated. It was the world she came from, the world of betrayal and ulterior motives, that was complicated. Here, in this valley, the rules were different. She was still a shinobi, still a viper. But for the first time, she wondered if she could learn to be something else. She looked from Naruto's calm face to Charmcaster's proud, watchful gaze. The dynamic in the grotto had changed. The dissonance of three was still present, but it was no longer just a clash of hostile notes. It was the beginning of a complex, strange, and undeniably powerful chord. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Echoes of a Metal World. A tentative harmony had settled over the grotto, as delicate and complex as a spider's web in the morning dew. It was not friendship, not yet, but a truce born of shared experience and a grudging, unspoken respect. Enko and Charmcaster had found a strange, compelling rhythm in their differences. Mornings were now dedicated to a unique form of training that was, in itself, a constant negotiation of philosophies. Today, they were in a wide, grassy clearing by the lake. Enko was attempting to teach Charmcaster the fundamentals of hand-to-hand combat, a concept the sorceress found both barbaric and oddly fascinating. No, 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 Enko grunted, easily sidestepping Charmcaster's telegraphed, magically augmented punch. You're thinking like a mage. You're gathering power in your fist and then unleashing it. That's slow. It's a firecracker. Combat isn't about the explosion. It's about the trigger. It's here, she said, tapping her own center of gravity, and here. She tapped her temple. Leverage and intent. Forget power. Use your body as a weapon, not a wand. Charmcaster scowled, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow. It feels inefficient. Why would I bother with all this clumsy posturing when I can reshape the very ground you stand on with a single word? Because one day, you might face someone who can move faster than you can speak, Enko shot back, her voice sharp with the authority of a seasoned instructor. Or someone who can silence you. Or someone who gets close enough to put a knife in your throat before you can finish your fancy rhyme. Power is useless if you can't survive long enough to use it. Now, again, from the balls of your feet. Explode. Charmcaster, to her own surprise, found herself complying. The physical discipline was a stark contrast to the mental and spiritual focus Naruto demanded, but it was grounding. It connected her to her own body in a way she never had before. She was beginning to understand that true power wasn't just about wielding external forces, but about achieving a total mastery of the self, body, mind, and spirit. In turn, Charmcaster would spend afternoons explaining the theoretical underpinnings of her magic to Enko. The shinobi, whose understanding of energy was limited to the pragmatic, weaponized application of chakra, was initially dismissive, but she was not stupid. She recognized the tactical advantage in understanding an enemy's power source. So, you're telling me, Enko said, leaning against a tree as Charmcaster levitated several stones, arranging them in complex geometric patterns, that you don't have an internal network like chakra coils. You just pull the energy from the air. Not from the air, you dunce, Charmcaster retorted, the insult lacking its former venom. From a separate dimension, a source of raw, chaotic magical energy. A spell is a key, an incantation a lock. It opens a door and shapes what comes through. It's about resonance and will. Here, in the valley, It's difficult because the ambient mana, the voice of this world, is so strong it creates interference. It's like trying to tune a radio in the middle of a lightning storm. Enko grunted, processing the information. So your magic dimension is your power source. Cut you off from that. And you're just a girl in a goth outfit. A cruel smirk played on her lips. Good to know. It was during one of these sessions, as the midday sun warmed the valley, that the harmony was shattered. It began not as a sound, but as a feeling, a high-frequency vibration in the air, a pressure in the ears, a jarring, unnatural hum that set everyone's teeth on edge. Kurama, who had been dozing in a patch of sun near the grotto, lifted his massive head, a low, guttural growl rumbling in his chest. In the clearing, Enko and Charmcaster both froze, their training forgotten. Then came the sound, a terrifying, high-pitched scream that was not animal or human, the sound of metal torturing the very atmosphere. They looked up. High above, a streak of fire and black smoke tore a wound across the perfect blue canvas of the sky. It was moving at an impossible speed, descending rapidly towards the northern ridge of the valley. It was not a meteor. Its trajectory was too flat, its shape too defined. It was something made, something artificial, and it was dying. The object disappeared behind the ridge, and a few seconds later, the ground beneath their feet trembled violently. A deep, percussive boom echoed through the valley, a sound of cataclysmic impact that sent birds screeching into the air from every tree. A plume of black smoke, oily and foul, began to rise from the crash site, a vulgar stain against the pristine green of the forest. Naruto was there before the echo of the crash had fully faded. He stood between the two women, his gaze fixed on the rising smoke, his face a mask of profound, sorrowful gravity. The valley was screaming. He could feel the impact site as a raw, open wound, a place of shattered trees, scorched earth, and the agonizing silence of life that had been violently extinguished. But beneath that, there was something else, a cold, sterile, and utterly alien presence. It was the energy of a machine, but a machine of a complexity he had never encountered. It was a note so dissonant it threatened to tear the valley's symphony apart. What was that? Enko demanded, her body already coiled for battle, a kunai in her hand. An airship, some kind of weapon. I don't know, Naruto admitted, his voice tight. Its essence is hollow. It has no life, no spirit. It is an echo of a world made of metal and lightning. He looked at his two companions, his expression hardening with resolve. We must see what it is. But we will approach with caution. This is an unknown. The journey to the crash site was a grim procession through a wounded landscape. The closer they got, the more apparent the devastation became. Trees that had stood for centuries were snapped in half like twigs. The rich, dark soil was gouged and thrown about, and the air was thick with the acrid stench of burnt fuel and superheated metal, a smell that was an offense to the natural perfume of the valley. The object itself rested in a crater of its own making, a deep scar in the earth 100 meters across. It was a vessel of some kind, roughly wedge-shaped, about the size of a small house. Its hull was composed of a matte black alloy that seemed to drink the light, scarred and pitted from a violent atmospheric entry. Strange symbols and script, unlike any fuinjutsu or written language they had ever seen, were faintly visible beneath the scorch marks. Wires and conduits, the severed nerves of some great beast, sparked and hissed, leaking a strange, viscous, iridescent fluid that sizzled on the ground. The thing was utterly, profoundly alien. Enko was the first to move, her shinobi training taking over. Perimeter, she barked, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. She began to circle the crater, her eyes scanning for survivors, hostiles, or secondary traps. Her analysis was swift. No bodies, no tracks leading away. Whatever was in it is still in it, or was vaporized. The hull is some kind of ablative composite. No visible seams or hatches on this side. Could be booby-trapped. Charmcaster approached more slowly, her hand outstretched, her expression one of intense concentration. She was trying to read the object, to feel its magical signature, its history. The result was deeply unsettling. There's nothing, she murmured, her voice laced with confusion. It's dead. I mean, more than dead. A rock has more of a spiritual presence than this thing. It's like a hole in the world. It has no magic, No life force, no connection to anything. It just is. The lack of any magical signature was, to her, more frightening than any dark aura. It was a true unknown. Naruto stood at the lip of the crater, his eyes closed. He was not looking at the vessel, but listening to it. Anko saw threats, Charmcaster saw a void, but Naruto perceived something more. He felt the machine's purpose. It was a vessel of escape, a lifeboat. He could feel the faint, residual psychic imprint of its pilot, a single occupant, and the overwhelming emotions that had been burned into its very memory banks. Terror, desperation, pain, and a grim, cold determination. And deep within the cold, dead heart of the machine, he felt a flicker. A tiny, impossibly faint spark of life, held in a state of deliberate, forced stillness. There is someone inside, he announced, opening his eyes. Alive, but sleeping a cold sleep. He began to walk down into the crater, his maw, immense sure and steady on the treacherous, rubble-strewn slope. Wait, Anko called out. We don't know what's in there. It could be a containment vessel for some kind of biological weapon, for all we know. It is a ship of healing. Naruto corrected, his hand now resting on the warm, black hull. A medical stasis pod. The pilot was gravely injured. The vessel's final act was to preserve her life. He could feel the machine's internal systems, the intricate flow of energy, the complex interplay of technologies far beyond his own world's understanding. But to him, it was all just another form of energy. Another language to be learned. It was a dialect of lightning and mathematics, but it was still a part of the universal grammar of mana. He walked the length of the ship, his palm sliding over its strange, smooth surface. He was listening, conversing with the machine's dying spirit, its emergency protocols. He found what he was looking for. A section of the hull that was subtly different, a panel that hummed with a faint residual power. Here, he said, this is the way in. But the power systems are failing. The locking mechanism is fused. Stand back, Anko said, pulling a series of explosive tags from her pouch. I can breach it in 5 seconds. No, Naruto and Charmcaster said in unison. A violent entry could compromise the internal environment, Naruto explained patiently. It could kill the occupant. Your explosives are a hammer, Anko. We need a key. And your magic? He asked, looking to Charmcaster. She shook her head, a frustrated frown on her face. I can't. There's nothing for my magic to grip. It's like trying to grab smoke. The material seems to be completely inert, magically speaking. Naruto nodded. Then we must speak to it in its own language. He laced both of his palms flat against the panel. A language of energy. He closed his eyes again. The air around him grew still. Anko and Charmcaster watched, one with tactical curiosity, the other with academic fascination. A pale, golden aura, the color of pure, refined mana, began to emanate from Naruto's hands. It was not a blast of force, it was an insidious, gentle pressure. He wasn't trying to break the lock. He was feeding it power. He felt the internal circuitry, the fried relays, the broken conduits. He bypassed them, his mana flowing through the system like a master electrician rewiring a house in the dark. He found the magnetic locks, the tumblers of light and energy, and he gently, coaxingly, persuaded them to open. There was a soft hiss of decompressing atmosphere, and the panel, with a silent, hydraulic sigh, retracted into the hull, revealing a small, dark interior. A wave of cold, sterile air, smelling of antiseptic and coolant, washed over them. Inside, nestled in a cocoon of padded, white material, was a woman. She was suspended in a translucent, pale blue gel. She was slender, with short-cut hair the color of polished chrome, and her face, serene and beautiful in its forced sleep, was pale as alabaster. A thin, form-fitting, silvery suit covered her body, and along her arms and tracing the side of her neck were faint, glowing blue lines, intricate patterns. Hat suggested a fusion of biology and technology. A small, transparent mask covered her nose and mouth, misting slightly with every slow, artificially induced breath. On a monitor above her head, a single, blinking red light and a flatlining wave pattern indicated that the POD's life support systems had, in the last few moments, finally and completely failed. Her life is fading, Naruto said, his voice urgent. He reached into the pod. his hands sinking into the cold, viscous gel. Enko tensed, expecting some kind of defensive reaction, but there was none. The POD's systems can no longer sustain her. I will have to wake her. Is that wise? Enko asked, her hand on her kunai. Waking up a complete unknown from wherever she's from. She could be dangerous. To leave her to die is not an option, Naruto replied. His focus absolute. He placed one hand on the woman's forehead and the other over her heart. The golden aura of his mana flared, surrounding both him and the woman in a radiant, life-giving light. He wasn't just healing her, he was reigniting her. He could feel her biology, the strange cybernetic enhancements woven into her nervous system, the cellular damage from her injuries. He poured his own life force into her, a gentle but irresistible tide. He coaxed her heart to beat on its own, urged her lungs to draw a true breath, and mended the frayed connection between her organic and synthetic parts. The glowing blue lines on her skin flickered, then brightened, shifting from a dull azure to a vibrant cyan. The monitor above her head, which had been dead, suddenly sparked to life, displaying a complex, rapidly scrolling text in the same alien language as the hull, and a steady, rhythmic pulse wave. The woman's eyes snapped open. They were a startling, luminous silver, like pools of mercury. And they were not confused or groggy. They were sharp, analytical, and in an instant, they took in everything. Naruto's face, inches from her own, Charmcaster, standing behind him. Her expression a mixture of awe and apprehension. Enko, further back, poised in a defensive crouch, the wreckage of her pod, the alien sky and trees. A soft, synthesized voice, feminine but with a slightly metallic timbre, emanated from a small speaker on her suit's collar. Cryostasis revival complete. System diagnostics, critical. External environment does not match stellar cartography. Atmosphere composition, breathable, but with unknown biological contaminants. Multiple unidentified humanoid biosignatures detected. Her silver eyes focused on Naruto, the first and most immediate variable in her new, impossible equation. Her head tilted slightly, a gesture of pure, dispassionate curiosity. Query. The synthesized voice stated, devoid of any emotion. Identify yourself and your planetary designation. Enko and Charmcaster stared, dumbfounded. They had faced demons from other dimensions, and rogue shinobi with godlike powers. But this was something else. A woman from the stars. A woman of science and chrome. Awakened in a world of magic and nature. Naruto simply smiled, his golden aura receding, his hands gently withdrawing. He looked into her analytical, silver eyes and gave the same simple, honest answer he had given to all the lost souls who had found their way to his valley. My name is Naruto, he said. And you are safe here. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, processing his statement. The word, safe, was a variable her logic circuits had not encountered in a very long time. Her internal systems registered no immediate threats, but the sheer volume of unknown data was staggering. Her programming, her very identity, was screaming that this situation was impossible. But the man before her, who radiated a warmth and power that defied all known energy readings, was undeniably real. The strange new world she had crashed into was real. And her own, unexpected survival was real. The logic of her old world was broken. Here, a new equation was being written. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Logic of Life. The journey from the crash site back to the grotto was a study in contrasts, a moving tableau of impossible realities. At its center was Nova, her movements economical and precise. Her silver eyes sweeping her surroundings, cataloging, analyzing, processing data at a rate that would have caused a normal human mind to hemorrhage. Every rustle of a leaf, every bird call, every subtle shift in the light was a new input, a variable in an equation for which she had no baseline. She was a creature of sterile corridors and simulated starfields, now treading on living, breathing Earth. The sheer, overwhelming bandwidth of raw sensory information was a greater shock to her systems than the crash itself. Flanking her were the valley's other anomalies. Enko moved with a predator's coiled grace, her gaze just as sharp as Nova's but filtered through a different lens. She saw firing lines, ambush points, tactical advantages and disadvantages. She was assessing Nova not as a person to be helped, but as an unknown variable on the battlefield, a piece on the shogi board whose capabilities were still dangerously undefined. Her hand rarely strayed far from the kunai pouch at her hip. A constant, physical reminder of her ingrained suspicion. On Nova's other side, Charmcaster walked with a frustrated, intellectual curiosity. She was trying to extend her magical senses towards the newcomer. To get a reading, a feel for her aura, her life force. The result was a profound and deeply irritating nothingness. Probing Nova's energy signature was like trying to scoop water with a sieve. There was simply nothing there for her magic to interact with. It was a vacuum, a null space in the vibrant tapestry of the valley's mana. It was a deep, fundamental offense to her entire understanding of existence. Leading them all was Naruto. He walked with a quiet, unburdened purpose, his presence a calming anchor in the sea of their collective dissonance. He did not watch Nova with suspicion or analyze her with academic detachment. He simply included her in the tranquil sphere of his awareness, extending to her the same unspoken acceptance he gave to the trees and the stones. He was aware of the storm of analysis happening within Nova's mind, the tactical assessments in Anko's, and the magical frustration in Charmcaster's. He understood them all, and Hi's silence was an invitation for them to understand each other. They arrived at the entrance to the grotto, and for the first time since her awakening, Nova's systems registered a logical paradox that required immediate attention. Her internal processors, designed to analyze architecture and artificial structures, could not classify the grotto. It was a dwelling, yet it was alive. It was constructed, yet it had grown. The air within was 2.3% richer in oxygen than the exterior atmosphere, and contained trace elements of an energy signature her sensors could only classify as biokinetic radiation. Environmental analysis, her synthesized voice stated, her head tilting with a bird-like motion. The structure is a symbiotic fusion of flora and geoformation. Probability of natural occurrence, 0.0001%. It is a product of deliberate, high-level biological engineering. He didn't engineer it, Charmcaster scoffed, her pride stung by the cold, mechanical assessment of a place she had come to see as sacred. He asked it to grow. Nova's silver eyes swiveled to face Charmcaster. The concept of asking an ecosystem to reconfigure its growth patterns into a habitable structure is not a recognized scientific principle. Quote, "Then your science is tragically limited," Charmcaster retorted. Anko ignored their budding philosophical debate. "All right, Tin Woman," she said, her voice sharp and direct as she stepped in front of Nova, blocking her path. "Debriefing. Now, what's your designation? What's your mission? Who are you, and what are you running from?" Nova's gaze shifted to Anko. Her internal threat assessment matrix analyzed Anko's stance, muscle tension, and elevated heart rate. Threat level: moderate. Combat proficiency: high. Hostile intent: low. Primary motivation: IN formation gathering for strategic advantage. "My designation is Medical and Evacuation Pilot 734, she replied, her voice a flat monotone. "My mission was the preservation of a high-value biological sample during the fall of Cygnus X1. The mission is a failure. The sample was lost. My identity is a series of operational parameters and memory engrams. The entity I am running from is designated by my people as the Scourge. It is a silicon-based, nano-collective swarm intelligence. Its operational directive is the conversion of all stellar and biological matter into computational substrate." She delivered this galaxy-altering information with the same emotional weight as if she were reading a grocery list. Anko stared, her mind, accustomed to dealing with rogue ninja and political conspiracies, struggling to find a foothold in the sheer scale of the revelation. What? She means they were running from a sentient plague that eats planets, Charmcaster translated, her eyes wide. The concept, while alien, resonated with her understanding of all-consuming magical entities. "And it's made of smart sand." A simplified, but functionally accurate, analogy, Nova's voice confirmed. Naruto stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Anko's shoulder. "The questions can wait," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "She is injured. Her systems are failing." He looked at Nova, and his gaze was not analytical or tactical, but filled with a simple, profound compassion. "Your body is a marvel, a fusion of two worlds. But the crash has created a dissonance between them. The organic and the synthetic are fighting each other. You must allow me to help you." Nova focused on him. Her medical scanners were active, and they confirmed his assessment. Her cellular regeneration as being inhibited by feedback from her damaged cybernetics, which were in turn being destabilized by the uncontrolled bioelectric fields of her healing body. It was a cascade failure that would, in 17.4 hours, result in total systemic collapse. Her ship's medical pod could have repaired it. He could not. Your offer is illogical, she stated. My internal systems require nano-assemblers and a stabilized energy source calibrated to a frequency of 7.8 terahertz. Your biological nature and the ambient energy field of this valley are incompatible with my core architecture. Your help has a 97.3% probability of accelerating my system failure. Your science is based on the world you know, Naruto replied, his smile unwavering. This world operates on a different, but no less valid, logic. Energy I command is not a calibrated frequency. It is the source code. It is the logic of life itself. It can speak to the life in your cells and the lightning in your wires. Please, let me try. There was no data to support his claim. Every logical protocol in her system screamed that this was a mistake. But there was another input she could not ignore, the irrefutable fact that this man's intervention had already saved her from certain death in the stasis pod. It was an anomalous data point, but a powerful one. Faced with the certainty of system failure and the infinitesimal possibility of his claim being true, the logical choice was to embrace the anomaly. Proceed, she said, the single word a massive leap of faith for a being built on certainty. Naruto led her to the center of the grotto, to the dais of living moss where Charmcaster had first awakened. Sit, he requested. Nova complied, her movements precise, her posture perfect. Anko and Charmcaster watched from a distance, a silent, captive audience to a procedure that belonged to neither of their worlds. Naruto knelt before her. He did not touch her at first. He simply closed his eyes, and the entire grotto seemed to hold its breath. He extended his hands, palms facing Nova but not touching her, and a soft, golden light, warm and pure, began to emanate from them. He was not just pushing energy at her, he was doing something far more complex. Nova's internal sensors went haywire. The energy he was projecting was not heat, not radiation, not kinetic force. It was information, a stream of data so complex and elegant it made her own ship's quantum computers look like primitive abacuses. She could feel it washing over her, and then through her. It was not an invasive probe, but a gentle, resonant inquiry. It was mapping her systems, learning her architecture, understanding her down to the subatomic level. He was reading her schematics. Then, he began to rewrite her. The golden light intensified, and he placed his hands on her shoulders. For a being of logic, the sensation was a paradox. It was like being plugged into a star. The energy flowed into her, and it was not the calibrated, sterile power her systems were designed for. It was wild, alive, and infinitely adaptable. She felt it branch, splitting into 1,000 different streams. One stream, warm and gentle, interfaced with her organic cells, soothing inflammation, accelerating regeneration, speaking the ancient language of biology. It was a conversation of proteins and amino acids, a symphony of healing. Simultaneously, another stream, sharper and more focused, interfaced with her cybernetics. She felt the energy flow into her neural pathways, her optical sensors, her micro-servos. It was not crude power. It was a targeted, intelligent force. It bypassed her damaged power conduits and fed energy directly to the components that needed it. She could feel her internal nano-assemblers, dormant for lack of power, whirring back to life. They were not just reactivated. They were augmented, their efficiency boosted by a factor of 10. The golden energy was not just powering them, it was teaching them, showing them new, more efficient ways to repair and rebuild. On her internal diagnostics display, a flood of green text scrolled past her vision. Neural processor damage, repaired. Power conduit breach, bypassed and sealed. Cellular degradation, reversed. Nano-assembler swarm, reactivated and operating at 150% efficiency. This was impossible. A biological being from a pre-stellar civilization could not interface with and repair post-singularity technology. It was a violation of every known law of physics and information theory. Yet, it was happening. She looked at the man before her, his face serene in concentration, and she had to create a new file in her core programming, a file labeled Naruto Uzumaki, and flag it with a single, damning identifier: logical impossibility. The process lasted for nearly an hour. When Naruto finally drew his hands back, the golden light faded, leaving the grotto in the soft, ethereal glow of the phosphorescent moss. He looked tired, a sheen of sweat on his brow, but his eyes were clear and calm. Nova performed a full systemic self-diagnostic. The results were irrefutable. All physical injuries were healed. All technological systems were repaired and optimized. Her internal power cell, which had been at 3.7% capacity, was now fully charged. He had not just healed her, he had made her better than she was before the crash. She rose to her feet, her movements now utterly silent and fluid. She flexed her fingers, the micro-servos in her hand responding with a speed and precision that was a fraction of a millisecond faster than her previous specifications. "The repairs are complete," her synthesized voice stated. And then, for the first time, a new subroutine kicked in, one that her programming had rarely found cause to use. The logical course of action is to express gratitude. "Thank you." Naruto simply nodded, a warm smile on his face. "You were hurt. Now you are not. The logic is simple." Enko watched the whole display with a calculating, narrowed gaze. The man's abilities were even more terrifying than she had thought. He hadn't just healed the cyborg, he had interfaced with it, repaired it, recharged it. The strategic implications were staggering. Could he do the same to a puppet? To a Fuinjutsu array? Could he disable Konoha's entire barrier system just by touching it? The questions piled up, each one more alarming than the last. She had to get a report back to the village. The existence of this man changed everything. Charmcaster, on the other hand, was vibrating with intellectual excitement. "What did you do?" she demanded, approaching Naruto, her eyes alight with a feverish curiosity. "It wasn't just life force transfer. You were manipulating the energy in her systems, the electricity. It's a form of elemental manipulation, but on a microscopic scale." "Is that what mana can do? Can it truly command any form of energy?" "Mana is the connection between all things," Naruto explained, his breathing slowly returning to normal. "The lightning in a storm cloud and the lightning in her wires are born from the same principle. One is simply wild, the other is tame. I did not command it. I merely reminded the tame lightning of its connection to the wild. And it remembered how to heal itself." The next few days were an accelerated course in mutual bewilderment. Nova, designated Nova by Naruto in an act of simple, profound humanization she did not yet understand, became an observer. A silent, silver-eyed presence in the grotto. She followed her new directive. Primary objective: observe and analyze the Naruto anomaly and its environment to formulate a new survival strategy. She analyzed Anko's training regimen, calculating the physics of her movements, the tensile strength of her ninja wire, and the chemical composition of her soldier pills. She downloaded the data, but the core concept of a life dedicated to such violent, self-destructive perfection remained an illogical variable. She observed Charmcaster's attempts to practice her new, gentler form of magic. She placed sensors around the sorceress and recorded the shifts in atmospheric pressure, electromagnetic fields, and quantum particle states that accompanied her spells. She logged the data, confirming that Charmcaster was, in fact, creating localized breaches into another dimension to channel energy. It was a fascinating, if suicidally reckless, form of applied physics. But the why of it, the drive for a power that seemed to bring more trouble than it was worth, was an emotional equation she could not solve. Her most fascinating data set, however, was Naruto himself. She observed him tending to his garden, speaking to his plants. Her audio sensors picked up no sound, but her energy scanners showed a clear transfer of information, a bio-resonant frequency T had caused the plant's cellular growth to accelerate. She watched him meditate by the waterfall, and her sensors registered that his body's energy output dropped to near zero, while the ambient energy of the entire valley peaked, synchronizing with his brainwave patterns. He was not just living in the valley, he was its central processing unit. The shared meals became a daily exercise in cognitive dissonance. Nova did not require sustenance in the same way, but her systems could process organic matter for energy conversion. Naruto offered her a bowl of the valley's fruit. She took one, a perfect, sun-yellow pear. Commencing analysis, her voice stated. She produced a tiny, needle-like probe from her fingertip and inserted it into the fruit. A holographic display shimmered in the air above her hand, showing the fruit's cellular structure, sugar content, and energy potential. Subject is a pome fruit of the genus Pyrus. Cellular structure is unusually robust. Contains 1.2 kilocalories of bioavailable energy. Trace elements of unknown biokinetic energy signature detected, consistent with the valley's ambient field. Conclusion. An efficient, if unremarkable, biofuel source. She then bit into it. Her taste sensors, designed for chemical analysis, were flooded with an unexpected cascade of data. Sweetness. 8.7 on the Richter scale of sucrose equivalents. Tartness. 3.2. Texture. Granular but pleasing. Unexpected data packet received. Flavor. Cross-referencing. No data found. It is pleasant, she stated, the synthesized word feeling wholly inadequate to describe the sensation. That is its purpose, Naruto said, smiling. Not just to be fuel, but to be enjoyed. Another simple logic. Their most significant interaction came when Nova decided she needed to retrieve what was left of her ship's log. The scourge does not leave survivors, she stated, her tone flat but the implication clear. My survival is a statistical anomaly. It is probable that a tracking signal was imprinted on my vessel's quantum drive during my escape. If that signal is still active, it is broadcasting this planet's location. The log is the only way to confirm and disable it. The threat of a planet-eating swarm sobered everyone instantly. They returned to the crash site. The black, wedge-shaped ship was a dead, ugly thing in the vibrant forest. Nova moved to an access panel, her fingers tracing the seams. The primary power core is offline. The secondary systems are fried. The console for the ship's log is physically destroyed. Anko peered into the wreckage. So it's a total loss. No, Nova replied. The actual data is stored in a crystalline memory matrix at the heart of the ship. It is shielded against radiation, impact, and energy pulses. It is likely intact, but the retrieval mechanism is destroyed. We would need to cut through a 2-meter thick slab of reinforced carbon silicate hull to reach it. Anko whistled. Can't be done. Not without industrial-grade cutting tools. Perhaps, Naruto said, stepping forward. He placed his hand on the hull above where Nova had indicated the memory crystal was. But this hull, like all things, has a nature. A structure. A song. It is just a very stubborn, very quiet song. He closed his eyes. Charmcaster and Anko exchanged a skeptical look. Nova simply observed, her sensors focused on Naruto. This was another test of the anomaly. Naruto's hand began to glow. Not with the golden light of life, but with a sharp, intense, pale blue light. It was the color of a star's heart, the color of pure, focused power. He was not pushing. He was vibrating. He was matching the resonant frequency of the carbon silicate bonds in the hull. He was finding the one note in its song that, if sung loud enough, would cause the entire structure to come undone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a low hum began to emanate from the ship's hull, growing in pitch and intensity. Fine, thread-like cracks of blue light spread from Naruto's palm, branching out like frost on a windowpane. They were not cracks of destruction, but of deconstruction. He's not breaking it, Charmcaster breathed, her voice filled with awe. He's unmaking it. With a final, high-pitched chime, the section of the hull beneath Naruto's hand dissolved. It did not explode or melt. It simply turned into a cloud of fine, gray dust that drifted away on the breeze, revealing a cavity within the ship. And nestled in a protective casing was a large, multifaceted crystal, pulsing with a faint, internal light. Nova stared, her optical sensors unable to fully process what had just occurred. He had just disintegrated a material designed to withstand the gravitational forces of a black hole by humming at it. Logical impossibility, the file in her head screamed. She reached in and carefully removed the memory crystal. It was cool to the touch. The crystal is intact, she confirmed. But it requires a power source and a reader to access the data. Bring it back to the grotto, Naruto said. His work done. There is power there. Back in their living sanctuary, They placed the crystal on a flat stone. I need to interface with it, Nova explained. But I need a conductive medium to channel both power and data. I can create a rudimentary matrix, Charmcaster offered, her academic pride on the line. She began to whisper words of power, her hands weaving patterns in the air. A fine, intricate web of pink, magical energy began to form around the crystal, a lattice of pure power. This will hold it, but I cannot make it read it. The information is not magical. And I can't read its language, Nova stated. But I can if I have a power source. Naruto stepped forward once more. Anko, he said, your ninja wire, please. Confused, Anko complied, handing him a spool of the deceptively thin, incredibly strong wire. Naruto took a length of it and, with impossible delicacy, wrapped it around the crystal, weaving it into Charmcaster's magical lattice. He then handed the other end to Nova. Plug this into your systems. Nova hesitated, then complied, a port opening on her wrist. She connected the wire. Naruto placed one hand on the crystal and took Nova's free hand with his other, completing a bizarre, hybrid circuit of magic, technology, and pure life force. Now, he said, let us listen together. He poured his energy into the circuit. The crystal flared to life, glowing with a brilliant blue light. Charmcaster's pink lattice pulsed, stabilizing the energy flow. The ninja wire hummed, channeling the data. The energy flowed through Naruto, into Nova, and back into the crystal. It was a perfect, impossible symbiosis. Holographic images flickered into the air above the crystal. They saw the bridge of Nova's ship, a place of clean lines and holographic displays. They saw the attack, a vast, swirling cloud of black, metallic particles that engulfed a planet, stripping it bare in minutes. They saw Nova's desperate escape, alarms blaring, her ship shuddering as the scourge tried to consume it. They saw the final, desperate jump to an unknown quadrant of the galaxy, the damage her ship had taken, and the final log entry from the HIP's AI before it crashed. Quantum signal from Scourge hive mind detected. Trace active. Estimated time until vector is triangulated, 4.8 standard years. The image died. The threat was not immediate. But it was coming. A death sentence for their entire world, with a deadline of just under 5 years. The grotto was silent, the weight of the revelation pressing down on them. Anko, a soldier used to fighting other people, was now faced with an enemy that ate stars. Charmcaster, a sorceress who sought power, was now confronted with a force beyond any magic she could conceive. Nova disconnected the wire, the crystal's light fading. She stood, processing the new, terrible data. Her mission to protect the sample had failed. Her ship was destroyed, but she had a new mission now, one born of Logi. See, in an emotion she was only just beginning to catalog, responsibility. This world is now in danger because of me, she stated, her voice flat, but the weight behind the words was immense. It is my logical duty to assist in its defense. Quote, Naruto looked at her, at this incredible being of chrome and spirit who had fallen from the sky. He saw not a machine or a weapon, but a refugee, a survivor, another lost soul who had found her way to his door. Her designation was Unit 734. She thought of herself as a series of operational parameters. But he saw something more. He saw the silver of a distant star in her hair and eyes. He saw the explosive potential of a new beginning. Your designation is long, he said, his voice gentle, drawing her out of her logical spiral. And this is a place of new beginnings. You fell from the stars. You are a new light in this valley. I will call you Nova. She looked at him. Her synthesized voice, for the first time, had a fractional hesitation, a momentary glitch in its monotone perfection as it processed the offering. An act of naming, an act of identity, an act that was utterly, completely, beautifully illogical. Nova, she repeated, testing the sound. The word was stored. A new file was created, overriding the old designation. Acknowledged. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Council of the Lost. The silence that followed the revelation was a living thing. A fifth presence in the grotto. It was heavier than stone, colder than the void between worlds Nova had traversed. The last, terrible image from the memory crystal, the swirling, planet-sized cloud of black dust stripping a world to its core, seemed to be permanently etched onto the air itself. The gentle burbling of the stream, usually a sound of profound peace, now seemed like a fragile, naive whisper in the face of an oncoming hurricane. 4 years. 4.8 standard years. The number was both an eternity and no time at all. Anko was the first to break the stillness. She moved, her body a single, fluid expression of contained violence. She began pacing the perimeter of the grotto, not in agitation, but with the grim, focused energy of a caged wolf planning its escape. Our world had been one of knives in the dark, of political intrigue and battles between superpowered humans. This new enemy, this scourge, was not an opponent to be outmaneuvered or assassinated. It was a force of nature, a geological event with a malevolent intelligence. Her shinobi training, her entire life's experience, was a finely honed chisel, and she was now faced with the task of carving a mountain. No, she muttered to herself, the word a harsh rasp in the quiet. No, the scale is wrong. The tactics are wrong. She stopped and turned, her eyes burning with a desperate, feral light as she fixed her gaze on the others. It's a consumption engine. That's all it is. It consumes matter and energy to replicate. It doesn't have a command structure to decapitate. It doesn't have supply lines to cut. It doesn't have morale to break. Every shuriken we throw at it, every fireball we launch, it will just eat. She ran a hand through her spiky, violet hair, a gesture of profound frustration. This isn't a war, it's an extermination. And we're the pests. Across the grotto, Charmcaster sank onto her mossy dais, her usual haughty demeanor completely gone, replaced by a pale, scholarly terror. Her mind, which thrived on understanding and manipulating systems of power, was struggling to find purchase on the sheer, brutal simplicity of the threat. There was no esoteric ritual to reverse, no ancient curse to break, no guardian to outwit. It was a problem of pure, horrifying physics. Anko is right, she said, her voice a strained whisper. My most powerful hexes, my most devastating curses, they are all just complex forms of energy transfer. The scourge would not be harmed by them. It would feed on them. It would analyze my magic and learn to replicate it. It would become a plague of magical, self-replicating dust. The thought was so horrifying that she visibly shuddered. The very source of her power, her pride, would be nothing more than a catalyst for their annihilation. Nova stood perfectly still beside the now dark memory crystal. Her silver eyes were distant, her internal processors running simulations at light speed, cross-referencing the scourge's known behavior. Or with the limited data she had on this world's capabilities. The results were a cascade of catastrophic failure probabilities. The shinobi's assessment is 98.7% accurate, her synthesized voice stated. The flat monotone somehow making the words even more chilling. The scourge's primary advantage is its logistical superiority. It operates on the principles of exponential growth. For every 10 its nanites destroyed by your chakra attacks, the energy released from the impact will be absorbed by a million others, powering their replication. A full-scale military engagement utilizing this world's current technological and energetic capabilities would not slow the scourge's advance. It would accelerate it. Based on my projections, a united planetary defense would be consumed in approximately 72 standard hours. The planet would be rendered a barren, metallic sphere in 96. The finality of her words hung in the air, a death sentence delivered with the dispassion of a machine. 3 women, a warrior, a sorceress, and a soldier from the stars, each a powerhouse in her own right, were now united in a single, terrifying conclusion: they were helpless. Their strengths were not just irrelevant, they were liabilities. They all looked to the one remaining variable: Naruto. He had remained silent throughout their spiral into despair. He stood by the stream, his head bowed, his hands clasped behind his back. He was not looking at the crystal or at them. He was listening, not to them, but to the valley. He could feel its quiet, terrified hum. The life force of his sanctuary, the ancient, patient consciousness of the trees and stones, had heard the terrible news through him, and it was afraid. For the first time since he had become its sage, the Valley of the Silent Flow was afraid. Finally, he raised his head, and his sky-blue eyes were clear, calm, and utterly resolute. The despair that had filled the grotto seemed to recede from his presence, as if his serenity were a tangible force. You were looking at the problem from the wrong perspective, he said, his voice quiet but resonant, cutting through their fear. You speak of fighting it, of launching attacks, of military engagements. You are trying to fight a flood by throwing stones into it. You will not win by attacking the scourge. You will win by making this world indigestible to it. He walked towards the center of the grotto, to the space between the three women, forcing them to turn and form a circle around him, the first council of this new, impossible war. Nova, the scourge consumes matter and energy, correct? It converts it into computational substrate. It turns the universe into more of itself. That is its core directive, Nova confirmed. Does it have a consciousness? A will? Does it feel? Naruto asked. It is a hive mind intelligence of immense complexity, Nova explained. Its collective consciousness would be analogous to what you might call a god. But it does not feel, in a biological sense. It has no fear, no hate, no joy. It has only its directive. It is the universe's ultimate logician, and its conclusion is that all matter should be organized into a single, perfect calculating machine, itself. Then it is a creature of pure logic, Naruto mused, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. And that is its weakness. It understands logic. It understands physics. It understands consumption. What it does not understand, he said, a slow, powerful smile spreading across his face, is life. True, chaotic, illogical, and infinitely stubborn life. He looked at Anko. You are right. Your armies would be useless as a weapon. But what if they were not a weapon? What if they were a shield? The people of this world, the shinobi, are not just soldiers. They are living conduits of an energy born of both spirit and body. Our chakra is not just raw power. It is an extension of our will, our very life force. The scourge can eat energy. Can it eat a soul? He turned to Charmcaster. Your magic. You say it would be food for this plague. But your magic is from another dimension, a place with different rules, different logic. You have tried to impose the logic of your world onto this one. What if, instead, we use your magic to teach this world a new, illogical defense? To create barriers that do not just block, but confuse. To weave a ward that does not repel, but repulses, on a fundamental, conceptual level. Can the scourge consume something that is, by its very nature, a paradox? He finally looked at Nova. And you are its opposite. You are a being of logic and order who has embraced life. You are the bridge. Your technology, combined with our energy, can create something new. Something the scourge has never encountered. Not a weapon that fires bullets of steel, but one that fires bullets of pure conceptual life. A virus not for machines, but for logic itself. His words did not offer a simple solution, but they did something far more important. They offered a new direction. He had taken their despair and reforged it into a radical, terrifying, and undeniably brilliant new strategy. To fight not with force, but with concepts. To defend not with walls of stone, but with walls of pure, unadulterated life. The mood in the grotto shifted. The oppressive weight of despair was replaced by the electric crackle of possibility. A conceptual defense, Charmcaster breathed, her eyes alight with a fierce, intellectual fire. We could create resonant fields based on magical feedback loops. Spells that are designed to grow in power the more they are consumed, creating a paradox that could, in theory, cause the scourge's logic to collapse into a recursive loop. It's beautiful. Biokinetic warfare, Anko muttered, her mind racing, translating Naruto's philosophical idea into brutal, practical terms. We could train shinobi to infuse their very life force into the earth, creating vast zones of indigestible land. We could use fuinjutsu not to attack, but to rewrite the very nature of the matter the scourge tries to consume. We could turn the entire planet into a poison pill. The fusion of your mana with my technology could create a systemic counter-agent, Nova added. Her processors working furiously to create new models based on Naruto's input. A logic virus, delivered via a targeted energy wave. It would not destroy the nanites, but rewrite their core directive, introducing a fatal flaw into their replication process. The probability of success is non-zero. It is a statistically significant improvement. The energy in the grotto was transformed. They were no longer victims waiting for an execution. They were scientists, strategists, warriors. They were the last hope of a world that didn't even know it was dying. Then we have our strategy, Enko said, her voice hard and decisive. The question is implementation. We have less than 5 years. That's not enough time. We need resources, manpower, research facilities. We need to warn the 5 great nations. I will leave at once. I'll take this information to the Hokage. Konoha must be warned. No. Naruto's single word was quiet, but it fell with the finality of a mountain collapsing. Enko stared at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. No. What do you mean? No. This is bigger than you, bigger than this valley. This is the whole world. They have a right to know, to prepare. And what will they do, Enko? Naruto asked, his voice gentle but unyielding. What will your Hokage do when you tell him that a plague that eats stars is coming? And that the only hope lies with an S-rank missing nin, a sorceress from another world, a woman from the stars, and a reclusive sage he doesn't know exists. What will the other Kage do? The Kazekage, the Raikage, the Tsuchikage? He didn't need to answer. Enko's own experience supplied the bitter truth. They will not unite, Naruto continued, his voice laced with a deep, ancient sorrow. They will panic. They will see not a shared threat, but an opportunity. The Raikage will demand I surrender my power to Kumo for safekeeping. The Tsuchikage will try to capture Nova to turn her into a weapon. Danzo Shimura will try to steal my eyes, your secrets, and Charmcaster's magic for the good of the village. They will fight over us. They will fight over this valley. They will spend the next our years trying to gain an advantage over each other, and when the scourge arrives, it will find a fractured, weakened world ripe for consumption. We cannot save this world by telling it the truth. Not yet. His logic was flawless, and it was a more damning indictment of her world than anything the scourge could ever accomplish. Enko stood speechless, her fierce loyalty to her village warring with the undeniable truth of Naruto's words. So what's your plan? She finally bit out, her voice tight with frustration. We just hide here. We sit in your garden and meditate while the clock ticks down to 0. We do not hide, Naruto corrected. We prepare. This valley will be our sanctuary, our laboratory, and our forge. Here, we will create the weapons, the shields, the strategies. Here, we are united. Here, we can work without the greed and fear of the outside world interfering. We will build our hope in secret, and when the time is right, when we have something to offer besides a death sentence, we will share it. But not a moment before. His declaration settled over them, a mantle of immense responsibility. He was not just a sage, he was a leader. He had laid out a plan that was both strategically sound and philosophically profound. It was in that moment of solemn resolution that a new feeling washed over the valley. It was not violent like Enko's arrival, nor paradoxical like Charmcaster's, nor alien like Nova's. It was a clear, pure, and deeply sorrowful presence. It was the feeling of a single, focused prayer cutting through the static of the world. Kurama, who had been listening from his corner of the grotto, lifted his great head, his ears twitching. A new one arrives, his voice echoed in their minds. She is not lost. She is guided. She has been walking towards this place for a month. Naruto closed his eyes, extending his senses to the very edge of his domain. He felt her, a young woman, standing at the foot of the mountains that formed the valley's border, blocked not by a physical wall, but by the subtle, protective aura of the valley itself, which would cause any who were not invited to simply lose their way. But she was not trying to force her way in. She was waiting, patiently. I must go, Naruto said. Wait here. He dissolved into a swirl of leaves, leaving the 3 women, and Nova, to stare after him. They found him at the base of a waterfall that marked the unofficial entrance to his lands. Standing before the shimmering curtain of water was a young woman. She was dressed in the immaculate white and red robes of a Miko, a shrine maiden. Her long, dark hair was tied back with a simple white ribbon, and her eyes, a deep, knowing violet, seemed to see more than just the physical world. She carried herself with a serene, almost otherworldly grace. But her face was etched with a profound and weary sadness. She looked as if she carried the sorrows of the entire world on her slender shoulders. As Naruto materialized from the leaves, she showed no surprise. She simply looked at him, her violet eyes scanning him not as a physical being, but as a nexus of light and power in the great tapestry of the world. You are the sage of this place, she stated. Her voice as soft and clear as a temple bell. It was not a question. The one spoken of in the whispers of the earth. The one they call the Silent Guardian. And you are the maiden of the celestial shrine, Naruto replied. His voice equally calm. Your presence is a surprise. Few know how to listen for this place. I did not listen, the Miko explained. I saw. My duty is to watch the celestial tapestry. The great loom where the fate of all things is woven. 10 days ago, a thread of silver, a thread from beyond the loom, fell and was woven into our world. And today I saw a new thread begin to form. A thread of absolute blackness, of perfect nothing. A thread that does not weave, but unravels. All the threads it touches, they end. Her voice trembled for the first time. It is the shadow of the end of all things. And it is coming for us. Anko, Charmcaster, and Nova had arrived silently behind Naruto, and they listened, frozen, as this stranger confirmed their tarry. BLE discovery through a completely different, mystical lens. The Miko continued, her eyes never leaving Naruto's. I looked for a thread strong enough to stop it. A knot that could not be unraveled. And I found only one. All the other threads of fate in this world are frayed, tangled with greed and fear. But here is a thread of pure gold, shining with the light of the world itself. It is you. Her violet eyes, which saw the flow of fate and destiny, suddenly widened, her serene composure shattering for a single, breathtaking moment. It was one thing to see the thread, it was another to stand before the weaver. She saw not just Naruto, the man. She saw the immense, boundless ocean of pure mana he commanded. She saw the ancient, powerful spirit of Kurama interwoven with his own. She saw the threads of the 3 remarkable women behind him already tying themselves to his fate. She saw him standing against the great, unraveling blackness, and she saw that he was not just a thread. He was the loom itself. With a grace that was both deeply ancient and utterly sincere, the Miko sank to her knees. She bowed her head, her forehead touching the mossy ground in a gesture of ultimate reverence and supplication. Sage of the silent flow, she said, her voice ringing with the clarity of prophecy. My name is Akari. I am the last watcher of the celestial loom. The fate of this world is broken. Please, teach us how to weave it anew. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Forge of Genesis. Akari's words, a prophecy spoken with the humble weight of absolute certainty, hung in the air long after she had spoken them. They were a validation of the impossible truth the others had uncovered in the cold data of Nova's memory crystal. The shadow of the end of all things. It was a poet's name for a physicist's nightmare. A mystical confirmation of a technological apocalypse. The two truths, born of opposite ends of the universal spectrum, now stood side by side, irrefutable and terrifying. Naruto looked down at the kneeling Miko. Her act of supplication not one of weakness, but of profound strength. The strength to recognize a power greater than her own and to ask for help. He reached down, his hands gently taking hers, and drew her to her feet. Her hands were cool and slender, but he could feel the immense, ancient river of spiritual energy that flowed through her, a lineage of Watcher S and seers stretching back for 1,000 years. Stand, Akari, he said, his voice soft but resonant. The time for kneeling is over. The time for work has begun. He turned to the other 3, who had watched the exchange with a mixture of shock, awe, and in Anko's case, deep-seated suspicion. Let us return to the grotto. Our council has a new member. The introductions were a tense, fascinating study in colliding worldviews. As Akari stepped into the living cavern, her violet eyes widened, not in surprise at its impossible nature, but in quiet recognition. This place, she whispered, her hand tracing the smooth, living bark of a support trunk. It breathes. It is in perfect harmony. It is a prayer made manifest. It's a house, Anko grunted, her arms crossed as she leaned against the far wall. Her posture a fortress of cynicism. So, you're a Miko. You see the future. I do not see the future, Akari corrected gently, her gaze turning to Anko. Her eyes were unnervingly perceptive, seeing not just the shinobi, but the scars on her soul, the shadow of the cursed seal that had been lifted. The future is not a destination to be seen, but a river with 1,000 currents. I see the currents, I see the shape of the water and the stones that lie beneath. And I see the great, black stone that threatens to dam the river for all time. She gave Anko a small, sad smile. You, warrior of the hidden leaf, have been swimming against a poisoned current your entire life. It must be a relief to finally feel clean water. Anko flinched as if struck. The Miko's words were not an attack, but they pierced her armor more effectively than any kunai. She said nothing, but her hostile stance softened almost imperceptibly. Charmcaster, ever the academic, was intrigued. Your abilities, she began, stepping forward. They are not magic in the way I understand it. You're not manipulating external energies. It's a form of perception. It is a form of listening, Akari replied, turning to the sorceress. You listen for the language of power. I listen for the language of purpose. Both are dialects of the great song. You, sorceress from the realm of chaos, have a beautiful voice, you. You have been taught to sing only songs of power and domination. You are just now learning the melodies of creation. Charmcaster, for the first time, was rendered speechless by an intellectual equa. Whose field was so far removed from her own, yet so clearly connected. Nova, as always, approached the problem with clinical precision. A thin, red beam of light shot from her optical sensor, scanning Akari from head to toe. Subject as designated, Akari. Human female. No cybernetic enhancements detected. Subject exhibits a unique biosignature, a low-level, persistent quantum field that appears to interact with local probability matrices. Hypothesis. Subjects, precognitive abilities are a biological function allowing for the perception of quantum entanglement on a macro scale. This is a previously undocumented evolutionary development. Akari simply smiled at the machine woman. You seek to measure the soul, she said, her voice filled with a gentle pity. It is like trying to measure the ocean with a thimble. Your soul, child of the void, is so very new. It is a perfect, logical crystal, but it has not yet learned how to catch the light. The four women, the warrior, the sorceress, the scientist, and the priestess, had been laid bare, their innermost natures seen and articulated by this newcomer in a matter of moments. They were no longer just a collection of refugees. They were archetypes, pillars of a new foundation. Akari is right, Naruto announced, his voice drawing their attention. We are all learning new songs. But this grotto is a place of peace, a place of healing. The work we must do now, it will be loud. It will be chaotic and dangerous. We will be forging new sciences, new magics, new philosophies. We need a new space. A forge. He led them from the grotto, deeper into the valley, to a place they had never seen before. Behind a cascade of vines that covered the face of a sheer cliff was a dark, narrow opening, a crack in the mountain itself. The air that flowed from it was cool and ancient, carrying the scent of deep earth and ozone. This valley is old, Naruto explained as he led them into the darkness. Older than any shinobi village, older than the Sage of Six Paths. And its heart is not made of wood and leaf, but of stone and crystal. The narrow passage opened up into a cavern of breathtaking, impossible scale. They were standing inside a geode the size of a cathedral. The walls, the floor, the vaulted ceiling high above, were all lined with colossal, perfectly formed crystals of amethyst, quartz, and a dozen other minerals they couldn't name. Some of the crystals were translucent, catching and refracting the faint light from the entrance in a million shimmering rainbows. Others were opaque, a deep, resonant black that seemed to absorb all light. But the most incredible feature was the steady, low hum that filled the space. It was the sound of the mountain itself, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to harmonize with the very marrow of their bones. And running through the largest of the crystals were veins of what looked like liquid light, pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm, like the circulatory system of a slumbering god. This is the heart of the valley, Naruto said, his voice echoing in the vast space. These crystals are natural conduits of mana. They draw the life force from the very core of the planet and focus it. This will be our forge. Here, the energies we unleash will be contained and grounded. Here, we can fail safely. Nova's sensors were in overdrive. The ambient energy readings are off the scale, she reported. Her synthesized voice filled with what could almost be described as awe. The crystalline structures act as natural amplifiers and capacitors. This cave is a geological supercomputer. This, Charmcaster whispered, her eyes wide with a sorceress's greed and a scholar's wonder, as a nexus of power unlike any I have ever imagined. The potential for ritual magic here is infinite. Then let our first ritual be the forging of hope, Naruto said. He led them to the center of the cavern, where a large, flat, obsidian-like crystal formed a natural platform. Our strategy is to create a new form of energy, a fusion of all our strengths, that can make this world anathema to the scourge. Let us begin. He laid out the plan, a practical application of the philosophy he had described earlier. Akari, you are the soul of this process. Your duty is to provide the conceptual blueprint. Focus on a single, pure concept. Not a complex idea, but a fundamental truth. The concept of sanctuary, a place that cannot be violated. Quote, Akari nodded, sinking to the crystalline floor. She closed her eyes, and the air around her grew still and heavy, as if she were a spiritual anchor. Charmcaster, you are the architect. You will open the conduit to your world's magic, but do not let it run wild. Weave it, shape it into a stable matrix, a vessel designed to hold Akari's concept. Charmcast. R's hands began to glow with a familiar pink light as she started her incantations. Nova, you are the engineer. Your technology will be the stabilizer. Create a containment field, a logical framework, to prevent the chaotic energies from collapsing in on themselves. Give form to Charmcaster's vessel. From a panel on Nova's wrist, a series of hard light projectors emerged, casting a shimmering, blue, geometric grid in the air above the platform. Enko, Naruto said, his gaze turning to the shinobi. You are the hammer, but a hammer can be used to build as well as to destroy. Your chakra is disciplined, powerful, and aggressive. It will be the fuel. But you must not inject it with the intent to fight. You must channel it with the intent to protect. Be the guardian at the gate. Use your power to shield the process, to contain any backlash. Enko gave a sharp, curt nod, her expression one of intense focus as she began to mold her blue chakra in her hands. And I, Naruto concluded, will be the harmonizer. I will use the mana of the valley as the medium, the thread that ties all of your works together. He placed his hands on the obsidian platform, and the veins of light in the crystals around them began to pulse faster. Brighter, their low hum rising in pitch. The forge was awake. The first attempt was a catastrophe. Akari's concept of sanctuary was pure and strong. Charmcaster's magical matrix was intricate and powerful. Nova's containment field was logically perfect. Enko's chakra shield was a wall of unyielding force. But they were not working together. They were four separate, powerful entities performing their tasks in the same space. The moment Enko's aggressive, battle-honed chakra touched Charmcaster's chaotic, otherworldly magic, the reaction was instantaneous and violent. The two energies clashed like fire and gunpowder. A screeching, tearing sound filled the cavern as the pink and blue energies warped and twisted. Nova's rigid, blue containment field, unable to adapt to the illogical explosion, shattered like glass. The raw, untamed power lashed out, and would have vaporized them all had it not been for the final two components of the equation. Enko, reacting with pure shinobi instinct, threw herself in front of the others, her hands flying through a dozen seals in a second. Earth-style. Mud wall. She roared, slamming her palms on the ground. A thick, chakra-infused wall of crystal erupted from the floor, but it began to crack and buckle instantly under the strain of the uncontrolled energy. At the same time, Naruto acted. He did not create a shield. He opened a door. He slammed his hands onto the obsidian platform and commanded, ground. All the while, explosive energy that was battering Enko's wall was suddenly pulled downwards, as if a cosmic drain had been opened beneath it. The obsidian platform glowed a searing white as it channeled the entire cataclysmic discharge deep into the planet's core, the great crystals of the forge humming a deep, resonant bass note as they absorbed the strain. The explosion was over as quickly as it had begun. Enko was on one knee, breathing heavily, her makeshift wall crumbling into dust. Charmcaster and Akari were pale with shock. Nova's projectors were smoking. The forge was unharmed, but their failure was absolute, and a testament to the sheer, dangerous power they wielded. Your chakra is a weapon, Enko, Charmcaster spat, her voice shaky but sharp. It tainted the entire matrix with its hostility. My chakra is what just kept your head from being blown off. Enko snarled back. Your magic is an untamed mess. It has no discipline. Both of you are correct, Naruto said, his voice cutting through their argument. He walked over to the platform, where a scorch mark was the only evidence of their near disaster. He picked up a small, sharp shard of crystal from the floor. Then he picked up a handful of soft, damp earth from a crack in the floor. Anko, your power is like this crystal. Sharp, strong, unyielding. Charmcaster, your power is like this earth. Full of potential, life, and chaos. If I try to smash them together, he said, slamming the crystal into the dirt, I get a mess. A sharp rock buried in a pile of mud. Useless. He then began to do something strange. He used the crystal shard to carefully, patiently, carve a small, intricate pattern into the obsidian platform. Then he took the damp earth and pressed it into the carved lines, wiping away the excess. The result was a beautiful, intricate sigil, the dark earth a stark, elegant contrast to the polished black crystal. But if I use the strength of the crystal to give shape to the potential of the earth, he said, holding it up for them to see, I create something new. Something that has both the lding nature of the stone and the life of the earth. You are not meant to clash. You are meant to complement. He looked at all of them. You are all trying to be the most important part of the equation. But there is no most important part. There is only the whole. We will try again. But this time, you will not act. You will breathe. Together. He had them all place their hands on the obsidian platform. Feel the hum of this place. He instructed. Match your breathing to it. In and out. Feel the rhythm of the mountain. Now, feel the rhythm of each other. Nova, feel the chaotic spark of Charmcaster's magic. Charmcaster, feel the rigid discipline of Anko's chakra. Anko, feel the serene faith of Akari. Akari, feel the cold, beautiful logic of Nova. Do not just tolerate these differences. Understand them. Embrace them. You are not four separate instruments. You are a single chord. He guided them for what felt like hours, a meditative exercise in pure empathy. Slowly, miraculously, a change began to occur. The discordant auras of the four women began to synchronize. Their breathing, their heartbeats, their very energy fields began to pulse in a single, shared rhythm. Now, Naruto whispered, begin. This time, there was no clash. This time, it was a dance. Akari's concept of sanctuary flowed outwards, a gentle, psychic wave of pure intent. Charmcaster's magic rose to meet it, not as a chaotic flood, but as 1,000 tiny, intricate threads, weaving themselves around Akari's concept, giving it texture and a magical form. Nova's hard light grid materialized, but this time it was not a rigid cage. It was a flexible, adaptive scaffold, flowing and reshaping itself in real time to support Charmcaster's weaving. Anko drew on her chakra, and instead of a shield, she molded it into a thin, semi-permeable membrane around the entire process, a container that was both strong and flexible, pushing back with just enough force to compress the energies, to give them focus. And through it all flowed Naruto's mana, the golden thread that stitched their disparate works into a single, cohesive whole. He was not commanding. He was facilitating, translating, ensuring that the warrior's will did not overwhelm the scholar's design, that the scientist's logic did not suffocate the priestess's faith. In the center of their combined efforts, a new light was born. It was not gold or blue or pink or silver. It was a soft, pearlescent white, a light that seemed to contain all colors and none. It coalesced, shrinking from a chaotic cloud into a single, perfect sphere of light the size of a fist. It hovered above the platform, radiating a profound sense of peace and an equally profound sense of unshakable, absolute strength. It felt warm like a hearth, unyielding like a mountain, complex like a spell, logical like a crystal, and sacred like a prayer. It was their combined natures, perfected and harmonized. They drew their hands back, their connection broken, and stared in breathless awe at what they had created. Probability of spontaneous energetic decay, 0.00%, Nova whispered, her voice modulator glitching slightly, conveying a sense of wonder her programming couldn't handle. The energy form is perfectly stable. Anko reached out a tentative hand, not to touch it, but to feel its presence. I can't feel any aggression from it, she murmured. But I know that nothing could break it. It's the concept, Akari said, tears streaming down her face, though her expression was one of radiant joy. It's sanctuary. It's not a shield that blocks. It's a statement of being. It simply is a place that cannot be violated. And the universe has agreed. This was their first success. Their first weapon. A seed of pure concept, forged from the unity of 5 worlds. They called it a Genesis seed. It was a single, tiny light against an all-consuming darkness. But as the 5 of them stood there in the heart of the ancient mountain, a warrior, a sorceress, a scientist, a priestess, and their sage, they knew it was enough. It was a beginning. It was hope, forged and made real. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. A symphony of impossible sciences. Months bled into a year. The passage of time in the Valley of the Silent Flow was not marked by a calendar, but by the subtle shift in the quality of light, the cycle of the moon blossoms, and the tangible, exponential growth of their impossible work. The great crystalline cavern, once a place of silent, geological grandeur, had been transformed. It was no longer the heart of the valley, it was the forge of Genesis, a breathtaking, chaotic, and beautiful fusion of 4 different worlds, all humming in a single, harmonious purpose. Nova's station was a testament to her adaptive genius. Hard light projectors cast shimmering, translucent blueprints and data streams into the air. Scraps of her wrecked vessel had been repurposed with a sculpture's ingenuity. Wires, as fine as hair and humming with channeled mana, snaked from the largest crystals, feeding a central console that was a hybrid of alien technology and Charmcaster's enchanted runes. It was a place of sterile, logical beauty, a corner of a starship's engie. Nay, room transplanted into a wizard's cave. Charmcaster's domain was a circle of pure, focused magic. The obsidian floor was now permanently etched with a Fuinjutsu array of Anko's design, which acted as a grounding circuit. Within that, her own complex, flowing runes pulsed with a soft pink light. Floating crystals orbited her work area, each one holding a different, isolated magical concept, like arcane reference books suspended in midair. It was a library, an altar, and a laboratory, all in one. Anko had carved out a space that was both a training ground and a testing range. The far wall of the cavern was scarred and pitted, not from destruction, but from controlled impacts. Training dummies, woven from living wood by Naruto, stood in silent rows, some embedded with Genesis seeds, others designed to test the limits of their new conceptual weapons. It was a place of disciplined violence, a dojo at the heart of creation. And at the center of it all, on a raised dais, sat Akari. She was the still point in the turning world. Around her, ethereal, shifting patterns of light, visible only to those who knew how to look, coalesced and dissolved. She was their compass, their muse, the who gazed into the endless ocean of concepts and chose the single, perfect drop of water they needed for the day's work. Their initial success with the first Genesis seed, the concept of sanctuary, had been the key that unlocked 100 new doors. They had quickly learned that forging the seeds was only the first, infant step. The true challenge was learning how to apply them. Each of the women had embarked on a personal, revolutionary journey, with Naruto as the constant guide, the facilitator who saw the connections they could not yet perceive. Anko, true to her nature, saw the seed as the ultimate defensive tool. Her project was one of personal integration. She wanted to wear sanctuary as an armor. It's too passive, she grunted in frustration one afternoon. She stood in her training area, a shimmering, pearlescent Genesis seed hovering before her. I can't wield it. I can't command it. It just sits there. She tried to channel her chakra into it, to force it to expand, to form a shield. But the seed simply absorbed her aggressive energy, its soft white light not even flickering. It's like trying to punch a cloud. Naruto approached her from behind, his footsteps silent on the crystal floor. That is because you are still thinking like a shinobi, he said, his voice calm. You are trying to command it. But sanctuary cannot be commanded. It can only be invited. It is not armor you wear, Anko. It is a state of being you must achieve. More philosophical nonsense, she muttered, though the words lacked their old bite. I need something I can use. Something that works in a fight. Then let us redefine the fight, Naruto said. He stood before her. Attack me. Try to kill me. Anko's eyes widened. Don't be an idiot. I'm not. Attack me, he repeated, his voice leaving no room for argument. His eyes were not challenging her, they were inviting her. A feral grin spread across Anko's face. It had been a long time since she had truly sparred. She exploded into motion, a blur of violet and black. Her first attack was a classic Konoha assassination technique, a feint with a kick to draw the eye while her hand, shaped like a knife, shot for his throat. It was a killing blow, delivered with practiced, lethal intent. Naruto didn't move to block it. He didn't dodge. He simply was. As her hand was about to connect, it met a resistance that was not there. It was not a physical barrier. Not a shield of chakra or mana. It was a conceptual wall. Her hand, a tool of violation, simply could not enter a space that was defined as inviolable. It was like her brain had forgotten how to complete the action. The intent was there, but the physical follow-through was an impossibility. Her arm locked, trembling with the strain of a command her body could no longer obey. "You see," Naruto said, his voice perfectly calm, though her fingertips were a millimeter from his larynx. "You cannot violate sanctuary, but I am not wielding it. I am it." He stepped back, and the resistance vanished. Anko stumbled forward, her mind reeling from the sheer, baffling wrongness of what had just happened. "How?" she breathed. "How do I do that?" "By letting go," he explained. "Your strength comes from your will. Your aggression, your intent to dominate your opponent. The strength of sanctuary comes from the absolute surrender of that will. It is the strength of the mountain that does not care if the wind blows. You must learn to be the mountain, Anko." He placed a hand on her shoulder. His touch was warm, grounding. "For a decade, you were defined by a brand that was forced upon you, a seal of violation. You have been freed from it. Now, you must learn to brand yourself, not with a mark of power, but with a mark of absolute peace. Let me show you." He guided her, not in combat, but in meditation. He taught her to feel the seed not as a tool, but as a resonance. He taught her to match her own life force to its frequency, to find the quiet, unshakable center within herself that had been buried under years of pain and rage. It was the hardest training Anko had ever endured. It was a battle not against an enemy, but against her own nature. But as she sat there, with Naruto's calm, steady presence as her anchor, she began to feel it. A stillness, a peace so profound it was a form of power in itself. This connection, this shared vulnerability and strength, as a more intimate bond than any she had ever known. A grudging, fiery respect was slowly, terrifyingly, beginning to feel like something more. Charmcaster's journey was one of intellectual deconstruction. She had filled dozens of magically created notebooks with her research, trying to codify the principles of conceptual energy. "It's the grammar that eludes me," she confessed to Naruto late one night in the forge. The two of them alone save for the silent, pulsing crystals. "I can feel the power of the seeds, but I cannot speak their language. My magic is a list of commands. Burn, bind, levitate. This is like trying to command the concept of blue. It's nonsensical." "That is because you are still trying to be the author," Naruto said, picking up one of her floating reference crystals. It contained the isolated concept of fire. "Your spells do not create fire. They open a door and allow the fire that already exists in your world to come through in a shape you desire. You are a gatekeeper." "And the Genesis seeds?" she asked, her eyes alight with intellectual hunger. "The seeds are not a gate. They are the author of a new page," he explained. "They do not summon a concept. They are the concept. They are a fundamental truth, written into the fabric of reality. To use their power, you must stop trying to issue commands. You must learn to write poetry." He took her hand, his touch sending a jolt of pure, non-magical energy through her. "Show me the most delicate, most controlled spell you know." Charmcaster focused, and a tiny, intricate cat made of pure pink, magical energy formed in her palm. It was a construct of remarkable detail, a testament to her fine control. "It is beautiful," Naruto said. "But it is an illusion. A puppet. Now, let us try something new." He placed his other hand over hers, his mana flowing into her, not to power her magic, but to guide it. "Do not think of a cat. Do not think of its shape, its color, its form. Think of the idea of a cat. Think of its independence, its curiosity, its grace, the concept of feline." He took a new, unascribed Genesis seed, a blank slate, and offered it to her. "Now, write that poem into this seed." Guided by his energy, Charmcaster reached out with her own. She did not cast a spell. She projected a feeling, An idea, a story. The blank seed in her hand flickered, and the concept of feline was imprinted upon it. Then, Naruto had her hold the newly programmed seed and channel a tiny wisp of her magic into it. The result was not a construct. It was not a puppet. A creature of soft, white, conceptual light, shaped like a cat, leapt from her palm. It was not an illusion of life. It was life, in a purely conceptual form. It moved with an impossible, fluid grace. It explored the crystal floor with a palpable curiosity. It was independent. She had not created a thing. She had given form to an idea. Tears welled in Charmcaster's eyes. She had spent her entire life chasing a bigger spell, a more powerful artifact. Naruto had just handed her the key to creation itself. The raw intellectual intimacy of the moment, the feeling of her mind being seen, understood, and expanded by his, was more potent than any love potion she had ever read about. Nova, meanwhile, was trying to solve the problem of mass production. Their one at a time, handcrafted method of creating Genesis seeds was too slow. She was designing a machine, a Genesis forge, that could stabilize and replicate the process. But she had hit a logical wall. The problem is the initial spark of creation, she explained to Naruto, gesturing to a complex holographic schematic that filled her workspace. My design can replicate every step of the process. It can create the containment field, channel and modulate the chakra and magical inputs, and stabilize the final product. But it cannot replicate the first step, the imprinting of a pure concept from a biological mind. There is no machine that can quantify a concept. It is a non-physical data set. The forge cannot proceed without a soul, and a soul is not a component I can manufacture. You are correct, Naruto agreed. You cannot build a soul, but you can build a home for one. He walked to the center of her schematic. Your machine is perfect. It is a flawless piece of logic. But you are asking it to solve an illogical problem. So, you must give it an illogical component. He pointed to the very heart of her design, the reaction chamber. You have designed this to be a perfect vacuum, a sterile environment to prevent contamination. Correct, Nova confirmed. It is the most logical design. Logic is not what is needed here, Naruto said. He reached out and, using his mana, took control of her holographic display, much to her astonishment. He deleted the vacuum chamber. In its place, he drew a new component. It was a small, biological-looking sphere. This is the new reaction chamber. It will be grown, not built. Woven from the living Wu-D of this valley and sustained by a direct flow of mana. And at its heart, he drew a single, glowing Fuinjutsu seal, a complex kanji that Nova's translators identified as heart, or spirit. We will place a seal of connection. Nova stared at the revised schematic. It was a monstrosity. It was a fusion of perfect, clean technology and chaotic, unpredictable biology. This is illogical, she stated, her voice flat. The potential for energy fluctuations, for biological contamination, the failure rate would be catastrophic. It will not fail, Naruto said with quiet confidence. Because the biological component is not a flaw. It is the purpose. The machine will not be creating the concept. It will be the lens. The seal will connect it directly to Akari, wherever she is. The living wood will act as a natural translator, converting her psychic energy into a form the machine can understand. You have built a perfect body, Nova. Now, we are giving it a soul. The idea was so far outside of her operational parameters that it should have been rejected as absurd. But she could not deny the strange, elegant truth of it. He had not solved her problem. He had redefined it in a way that made the impossible possible. She looked at him, at this being who could speak the language of machines and souls with equal fluency, and she had to create a new emotional subroutine in her core program. To properly categorize the data she was receiving. The closest word she could find was, awe. With Naruto's help, they built the new component. He grew it, and Nova, with painstaking precision, integrated it into her machine. The first time they activated the new Genesis Forge, the four women stood with Naruto, their hands linked. Akari, sitting in the grotto miles away, projected the concept of growth. The forge hummed to life. The living heart of the machine began to glow with a soft green light. Energy flowed, the system stabilized, and from the production nozzle, a single, perfect Genesis seed, glowing with a vibrant green light, emerged and floated into a containment unit. It worked. They had created a bridge between spirit and steel. The success was a monumental leap forward. They could now produce seeds at a steady rate, each one imprinted with a different concept provided by Akari. Clarity, to pierce illusions. Silence, to counter sound-based attacks. Strength, not of the body, but of the will. They were building an arsenal of ideas. One evening, after a long day of work, the five of them sat by the lake outside the grotto, watching the twin moons of this strange world rise. A comfortable, familiar silence had settled between them. They were no longer just a council of war. They were a team, a unit, perhaps even a family. Enko, who had finally succeeded in creating a semi-permanent, invisible armor of sanctuary around herself, was more relaxed than anyone had ever seen her. Charmcaster was quietly practicing her new, conceptual magic, making flowers of pure beauty bloom and fade in her palm. Nova was silently observing the celestial mechanics of the twin moons, her new appreciation for illogical things like beauty, adding a new layer to her calculations. Akari was simply smiling, her serene presence a comfort to them all. Naruto looked at them, at these four incredible, powerful, and unique women who had fallen into his life. The warrior who had learned the power of peace. The sorceress who had learned the art of creation. The scientist who had learned the logic of a soul. The priestess who carried the weight of the future. They were his students, his partners, his comrades, and they were, each in their own way, beautiful. He felt a profound sense of connection to them, a bond forged in the heart of their impossible forge. It was a feeling that went beyond responsibility, beyond friendship. He had healed their wounds, expanded their minds, and shown them a new path. And in turn, they had given him something he had never truly had in his long, lonely life as the valley's sole guardian, a purpose beyond himself. A reason to fight, a family to protect. Kurama's voice, deep and ancient, echoed in his mind, a familiar, grounding rumble. They are strong. The forge you have built is a testament to a power this world has not seen since the beginning. They are more than strong, Naruto replied in the silent conversation. They are hope. Be mindful, Kit, the great fox warned, a note of caution in his tone. Such a bright light does not go unnoticed. A forge that can create miracles can be seen across the universe. You are no low, Inger, just the silent guardian of a hidden valley. You are a beacon, and beacons attract moths. But they also attract things far, far older, and hungrier, than moths. Naruto looked at the stars, the cold, distant diamonds scattered across the black velvet sky. One of them, he knew, was not a star. It was a harbinger. The clock was ticking, and though they had forged a new kind of light, the shadow of the end of all things was still falling, growing longer with each passing day. Chapter 9 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.